and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
Good evening, all the lovely people out there. Nice to have you. So I guess we'll get right to it. The first thing on the agenda is the regionalization of dispatch services, and we have John, is it Lumbra, the Holyoke Treasurer, and PVPC representative. So John's here to talk to us, along with Josh Garcia from PVPC, to talk about a proposal to work together going forward in regionalizing dispatch services and grants available to help make this happen. Gentlemen, if you'd like to come up front, that would be helpful. Hi. Right in the front. Do you want them at the mic?
Except the mics.
Oh, the mics, yeah. Thanks.
That'd be better.
And if anyone here's forward. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for coming. I'm ready for all the information you have to share.
Do you want to start?
Great. Good evening. My name is Joshua Garcia, Municipal Services Coordinator over at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I think it would make more sense if you start, but just to give a little background and information, I guess, and John can chime in whenever he'd like. So Holyoke has been in conversation internally, and as the Shared Municipal Services Coordinator at the PVPC, what I do specifically is provide technical assistance for our member municipalities with the idea of looking into possibly consolidating services, whether if it's through shared services, through a fee contract, or through developing an intermunicipal agreement of whatnot, from building inspections to dispatching services to public health services and so forth. So any type of shared service conversation happening in a region, I usually am all on top of it and trying to learn more and see how the PVPC can provide some assistance with that if communities are looking to go forward. And I came across recognizing that Holyoke was having that conversation. And it's been going on for quite a bit, so that's how PVPC got involved. I can explain a little bit more about the DLTA grant moving forward once, John, if you want to go.
Sure. So my name is John Lumber. I'm treasurer for the city of Holyoke, and I handle the finances and special projects, which dispatching is one of them. We currently have two separate standalone dispatching systems, one for fire and one for police, and we outsource the medical service dispatching. And then we also have non-public safety dispatching for our DPW and our Council on Aging for the transport divisions. One thing that we've been looking at for the past two and a half years is a way to see if we can consolidate all our dispatching under one roof, see if there's any redundancy that we could eliminate or reduce through attrition. And one of the avenues that we've looked at is if we were able to partner with somebody else, there's a separate pool of money available at the state to cover regionalization to drive efficiencies. So when we look at our geographic setup for Holyoke, it doesn't really make sense for us to go to Chicopee. South Hadley has already had talks with the Amherst or UMass Amherst dispatching. I think recently that their fire department, two fire departments opted out and decided to keep it internally, and they contract with the police department. So looking at the abutters of the communities in separate conversations with Heather, she asked what our thoughts were on dispatching, if we might do anything. So I shared our plan to see if we can get to an area where we could, again, consolidate, reduce cost, utilize regionalization money. And I think that's what, independent of that, I think Josh was having a conversation with Heather, and it kind of brought us all up to tonight.
So one of the things that this came about was because we wanted to talk about the building inspector, am I right?
Partially, actually, Josh had contacted me, I believe, right before we came up to the building commissioner regionalization conversation, And after we came up with that, that's when John had contacted us about regionalizing the building commissioner position. That's when we started talking, and eventually A plus B equaled C. And we got back to the same point on dispatch. And apparently Josh and John had already talked about dispatch together.
So I guess my question is, what's the pros and what are the cons of regionalizing
Well,
the service?
I think that's where we're at now, is to see whether or not, if they're, without really looking for, commitments to move forward, is there a willingness to explore and utilize the funds through PVPC to do a feasibility study, to identify the pros, the cons for each individual community, so that the legislative bodies in both groups can make an informed decision as whether or not to continue to move forward, or just look at the data and determine that this isn't something that we should continue to spend time on.
So, and to that end, the funds that John's talking about, the district local technical assistance monies that we manage for the Commonwealth, it's funds available for community, provides flexibility to look into these kind of things, recognizing the limited resources and whether if it's staff time or funds, to look into the possibility of what this looks like, the pros and cons and so forth. But the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission coming January, the funds will be available for January of 2015, and the PVPC will dedicate up to $15,000 to pay for that study. I don't know what the total cost would be for that, but these are through conversation that we can come up with what that total cost would be. So moving forward, yeah, that's why we're here, to try to really look into, get deep into the study and find out what are the benefits for Holyoke and Southampton to, if it's in fact feasible to move forward.
So one of the options would be to see, if again, without having a lot of answers, to see if it's something that we want to explore, and then jointly we could issue an RFP contingent upon the grants and the funds coming in, just to build a mutual RFP for what we would want this study to be, or the results to be. We wanted to look at A plus B and C. How much would that cost? They would give us a cost based on that. If that number is somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 or 20,000, then it's pretty much all set, because 15,000 is going to come from them, and then even if you divided the portions between two communities. But if it comes in at 50,000, then probably from Holyoke's point of view, it's going to be a non-starter. And just issuing the RFP doesn't encumber us to spend any money other than existing personnel's time on writing up the proposal, and probably input from the Board of Selectmen here and the public safety and city council side in Holyoke, and whatever your process would be here for the bodies.
Have we talked to the fire chief and the police
The
chief about
police
this?
chief and the fire chief are both aware of this, and they were made aware that this is more of just an informational session for this evening, that there was no decision going to be made tonight. But I did speak with Chief Silvernail last week, and I spoke with Chief Workman today. And
is their general thought, this is a positive thing, or this is not something they want to go forward with?
Chief Silvernail's concerns are the same as I imagined they were last time that this was looked at several years ago, and that is the fact that right now where we have the police station in the town, it is the only building that's open 24 hours a day. There's someone currently present to be able to receive people should they come in. If there's a problem, they can tend to it. Right now, that same person also looks over, if there's anyone currently in the cells at the time they're there overnight. Those are some of the things we have that person utilized for at this point in time. I mean, that's stuff we could look into as we went forward, and I think if we move forward with anything, it would definitely be advantageous to do a joint meeting with anyone with information along with our chiefs, so that they could be fully involved from the beginning of anything, whether it's an idea process starting or further development.
Am I correct in assuming that really we can't do much more with this until January for the funding?
Well, there's different ways we can go about doing this. I mean, I think for January, yes, to receive that technical assistance portion and utilize those funds to assist with the study. There's a lot that we can accomplish probably internally by working together, working with your chiefs, our chiefs, pulling up the numbers. I mean, I'm confident that if they're serving these capacities, they're highly aware and intelligent of the work they produce. So I think we can do a lot of number crunching within, and then whatever we identify the things that we can't do, and then that's what we would put in an RFP requesting assistance for coming January. So these couple months starting from whenever you're ready to the end of the year, we can have that discussion. January comes, RFP can go out. I mean, that's just one way, but out of a million ways we could probably move forward.
I mean, a lot of preliminary work on the RFP, obviously, like you're saying, you can do it right now, get it all ready to go. And if the $15,000 grant doesn't come through, again, it doesn't sound like it could be a deal breaker, because if it's only $15,000 or $20,000 to do the actual work, we may want to share it. And we don't know it until the time comes, but I think the preliminary work we put into it is well worth the time spent.
Yeah, I don't see, I mean, again, other than utilizing existing personnel,
Right.
so, which we're already paying on both sides, to do the work of to get the group together, consider where we want this thing to go, and then to issue the RFQ or RFP to have the work done. We can do all that right up until January 1, so we already received the proposals, we know what the cost is going to be, and then we're ready to make the award on January 1, pending certification of the grant funds.
Jackie, sorry, John, go ahead.
We're talking about an RFP, so basically, that is going to allow us to say, here's a skeleton of what we're looking for. We want you to come back with your ideas and your thoughts on how to implement it and come up with the best thoughts.
Right.
Okay, so we're not going to box them in with an RFP, for instance, and tell them exactly what we want. We're going to allow people to come back, town spenders, whatever, to come back and give us some ideas that maybe we didn't see along the way. Is that how you perceive it?
Yes. Yep.
And in regards to the grant funds are available. And the way that DLTA works, in November, our executive director, Tim Brennan, will send out solicitation to the member communities of, to provide letters of request for the funds to undergo specific projects. So once that solicitation goes out, November and Holyoke would both provide a letter of interest to receive funds for this project, and pending the amount we receive, which historically is not overwhelmingly too many where we had to turn anybody away, but pending on the amount we receive are the projects that will get funded or will receive some technical assistance in January. So it's highly likely that funds will be available.
Well, who do you feel will respond to an RFP like this?
There's, for example, this year we're providing technical assistance for Williamsburg and Chesterfield, who are considering or who are looking into the feasibility of consolidating departments currently. Once the RFP goes out, there's numbers of consultants that do this kind of work that will respond to the RFP. So there is a good base. I mean, I would say, I think it was about 5 that had returned, that had submitted proposals to be the consultant for that study. Yeah.
I'm going to abstain. I'm just not.
Okay. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. Dave, me too.
Thanks for having us.
See you guys. I've been sitting here for a little bit, and there was a push back, I don't know how many years ago, to do a regionalization with Easthampton, Northampton. There was also a push with Hampshire County of Governments, and I think HCOG and PVPC are actually competing against each other for a lot of things. And the HCOG program sort of fell by the wayside. A couple of the towns pulled out, and it didn't go anywhere. So that regionalization program stalled out. Our former town administrator was part of that, Diane Schindler. Now she's moved on from that, but that sort of petered out. I happened to be a member of HCOG, elected from this town. And there was a little bit of talk about Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and the conflict between HCOG. Having said that, when looking at regionalization, I'd like to think that we're partnering people together that have similar stuff.
Absolutely.
You can fill in whatever stuff is. It just doesn't make sense from my standpoint that you would take a small town of 6,000 people and partner it with a city. And it's a different, it's different. And this is direct, and nothing against you, John, this is directed to Pioneer Valley. Would it be a better match for Southampton to be the lead for regionalization with Montgomery and West Hampton than for Southampton to be partnered with a city like Holyoke? You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, I mean, having looked at it in this past, and it hasn't really gone anywhere with our town, I think some of those questions have to be asked. Who's the best partner for our town? The bottom line, you want what's best for we have to advocate for Southampton.
Right.
What's
So-
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess my response would be, when it comes to regionalization projects, they're mostly are opted to be more successful when there's willingness from communities. And right now, there's an opportune moment as Holyoke's administration has expressed interest to look into this, and Southampton is, well, I don't want to say I'm under the assumption, but there is at least some curiosity to look into it. Some other communities that, some other communities that are out there have no interest at all and won't return an email or a phone call. At this moment, I was able to have a conversation with the town administrator, being able to come in front of Southampton and talk about it. These kind of things show an opportune moment for it. As far as communities being able to, geographical wise and as comparison goes, that those kind of things will be worked out through the study. I mean, if the study shows that it is in fact feasible, it's possible, both communities, that it can be done, then at that point you could have that conversation, should we move forward then? If the study shows that it can't be done, it's not possible, it's not feasible, of course you have to represent the best interest of Southampton, so you wouldn't really necessarily move forward with that study. So, I mean...
The only thing I would add is you could also probably, not knowing anything yet to qualify what I'm about to say, but you could also look to see Montgomery or what was the other town? West Hampton, if there's a willingness for them to come into the study. And maybe ultimately the study says, Holyoke, you stay off on your own, but the three of you really should look at doing this together and access the pools. And I think that's one of the benefits of starting now, waiting until January, because once January comes around, you've got 6 months, and they need to close out their fiscal year to have the conversation. There might be I didn't speak with anybody in those towns. There might be some willingness. I thought Montgomery was covered by Westfield. But still, to find out the answers to that.
We've just, in the past 7 years, we've invested into the dispatch with new software, upgrading equipment and stuff. So some money recently invested into the center, so it's there. The training is there. The dispatchers are trained to, I'm thinking of nursing, where they have this thing called Interact, where I think it's some of the same way where there's cue cards and they're sort of trained. If a person calls with this, these are some of the things that you might want to think about. Is that the type of training that the dispatchers have in Holyoke?
Yeah, Holyoke follows the state program for the enhanced 911 dispatching, the state certified course. And one of the other things leading this conversation in Holyoke, which has been in the papers, is we currently don't have EMD, emergency medical dispatch. Southampton does. I'm still not quite sure how that all works out, whether it comes out of the firehouse or comes out of the police station.
But I thought that the mayor was looking at a new contract with AMR or something?
Well,
Or developing their own? Was it
probably we're exploring bringing it in-house.
Okay.
So meaning adding that to our dispatchers. That's a quality that we currently don't have, Southampton does, because you're already doing EMD dispatching. for your ambulance service.
But you said you were doing a bunch of stuff. You're doing senior citizen dispatch.
Those are all standalones. So DPW has, we pay somebody down at DPW to dispatch.
But you weren't going to
The
put this all
trucks.
in one command control center for dispatch or anything? Was that?
One of the things was put all public safety, which is police, fire, and ambulance in one, and then in a sub-room off of it, non-public safety, because they're only operating Monday through Friday, 8 to 4.
Okay.
And that person could also, and our you know, high-level thought process would be that person would also then be the admin for whatever the administrator overseeing that division would be.
So where do we go from here? What do we need to do to move forward?
Well, I think as the gentleman had described before is, one of the possibilities would be to sit down with all the different chiefs on both sides, put everyone at the table and see if it's something that they're interested in, possibly investing some time and just do a feasibility study, or actually just to put out an RFQ on a feasibility study.
Right.
Just to see, you know, if we have the grant money coming in January that we can apply for. If theoretically we could possibly get away with it not costing us anything and have someone do a study that says, yes, this is a great idea from all of these angles, or no, it's not. But at least putting down all the parties at the table at the same time, I think is,
And
will get us a great place.
And communicate, I mean, assuming that this moves forward, communicate that with the other two towns. And, you know, this is what we're doing, do you want to jump on board now and share in the study? And let the study
Right.
fall where it does.
Well, my actual point was to have Southampton do its own thing with the small towns. That was where I was coming from. Again, what you're mixing together, size-wise and other aspects between a small town and a city. The other point is that, you know, if we were to close this dispatch, say, and we join either Northampton or Holyoke or Easthampton, then we close the only building that's open 24/7. And in my mind, it was always nice to know that, you know, if my son was a police patrolman out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, he knew that at least somebody was nearby in town if something should happen. And our police department is also a safe haven for somebody if they're in need of help or assistance of some sort. So it's nice having that aspect. It's like Southampton is always open by having that building open. If we closed dispatch, we'd have to get somebody else. We'd still have to get somebody in there to sit there to make sure it was open. That maybe not. Maybe the town decides that it doesn't need a place that's open 24/7. If somebody needs something, maybe they're just going to have to call 911 and not have a place to go. Simple things like directions or whatever else. Or if somebody's, you know, in need or threatened. So, I mean, those are some of the aspects that are a little more complex than just sort of saying, hey, regionalization, you lose some things in the town, and is that really a good thing for Southampton?
I can't argue with that. The only thing that I would just add to that is our existing locations probably would not handle this. So a new location would have to be built somewhere within the regional footprint.
That's one thing I was thinking about. He's not saying that this will necessarily close down, you know, where they're smaller. But I think during this process, we invite the small towns to come in, look at it, and the end result may be, I think John was saying, is you three small towns should get together because this is a good fit, base it in Southampton. Holyoke really is not a good fit. Or they may say Holyoke and Southampton are great fits. I think we're not going to invest a lot of time or money to find that out. And once we find it out, we'll know. We'll go on to the next one, either go with it or not, but I think we need to look at every opportunity. Not a big centralization type person, but opportunity, especially if it has the possibility of saving us money without downsizing services.
And our current two chiefs have no desire to retain dispatching. So there's no, I mean, I'm not saying that we build dispatch right here in the center of Southampton, but there's, yeah, right behind the old firehouse.
We're putting
I mean,
up a complex there.
Do you need a vote from us to move forward with some sort of meeting, or do we?
I think we just need some kind of decision from the board as to what action we're taking, whether we're going to proceed forward with, you know, possibly meeting with all the chiefs. I'm sure John and I can coordinate that. You don't have many chiefs, you only have 2, right?
That's right, yep.
So, that's,
Well, what does Mr. Garcia recommend?
So, I mean, what do I recommend moving forward? What do we need from you guys? Just a a decision from the committee basically saying that, you know, we are going to be part of this. We're willing to take part of this study moving forward, get together with the chiefs, talk about it. So we didn't want to go ahead and start talking to your chiefs about it and everyone else about without coming to the board first, and because you guys are the ones representing the towns, and once they can receive your blessings, you know, we can move forward and feel confident everyone can work together. And just to throw out there too, the DLTA is available for all 43 member municipalities to as long as it involves, whatever project it is involves 2 or more communities. I mean, if you're looking into other shared service opportunities with other towns or communities, when that solicitation comes out, you're more than welcome to provide a letter of interest to Tim Brennan's attention, requesting funds for technical assistance for whatever project it is.
I think that any conversation is a good conversation, wherever it leads. So I'm not opposed to getting everybody together and seeing where this goes. Do you want us to vote? Or do you want us to just say, I think that's a great idea and want you guys to work on getting it all together?
A vote would probably be more definitive, just so we had direction.
Make a motion to take the next step.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to move on with Mr. Lumber again, and at our last meeting on July 15th, the board was interested in further exploring our options of regionalization with the building commissioner officer position with Holyoke's initial proposal. Mr. Lumber is going to present that report for us.
Sure. So again, this, you know, the background is it's just a conversation that started based on seeing that the on your website that the position of building inspector, local building inspector or building commissioner was still being considered. So again, going back to, are there ways that neighboring communities that we can, you know, we can benefit from your service and expertise, or you can benefit from ours, or vice versa, and is it a good fit, and ultimately, is it something that both sets of constituents would agree with? This is it's 11 pages. I can kind of walk you through it. The first couple of paragraphs just talk about the, this ultimate proposal was for your inspector of buildings, otherwise commonly known as your building commissioner, but under Mass General Law, you know, inspector of buildings, that the City of Holyoke would utilize its inspector of buildings in name as the Southampton inspector of buildings. We would then add a local inspector under the building commissioner's authorization and authority to primarily be assigned to the town of Southampton Monday through Thursday, and then the Friday would be in Holyoke. Southampton's closed. Unless there was a need for something in Southampton, then he or she would be the primary person.
You mind if I just ask a question?
Sure.
When I was reading through this, I saw the Monday through Thursday. Now, the Holyoke Building Department would be open for people in Southampton to go to talk to them about a building permit or an issue in Southampton? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, yes, we would have, we would still maintain office hours within Southampton. But in the event, like a general contractor who maybe lives in South Hadley but does work in Southampton and Holyoke, it might be more convenient for them to go to Holyoke and get the permit signed off versus making the morning hours, office hours here in Southampton.
Thanks.
The benefit of this is Holyoke currently has a building commissioner, an assistant building commissioner, and then a series of inspectors. When the local inspector, the Southampton inspector, was not available through sickness, vacation, personal time, jury duty, whatever the case may be, FMLA, there would be 2 in a relatively short period of time, fully trained individuals that were brought up to speed on Southampton's individual zoning and code enforcement, which agreeably are different than that of a city. We spell out the, We propose that this, instead of looking into locking in or asking anybody to lock into a long 3 or 5 year agreement, that we just start with a pilot for the remainder of this fiscal year. August 1st is probably an unrealistic date, but just for the purposes of putting math on the paper, when we get to the end, I just picked August 1st. Those numbers can be adjusted on whatever the start date is. The first option is an all-inclusive option that we would also take over the electrical inspector, gas and plumbing inspectors, and I believe your inspectors currently are per diems, so they would be able to the extent that they wanted to, be added into the rotation or even become primaries out here, as they're doing now. The pricing that I gave, there's 3 sets of pricing just for illustration, but there's really 2 proposals. One is an all-inclusive, and the variable number that I don't know until the employee is selected is what their benefits would be, whether they're going to require a single plan or a family plan. So I did, best case is that they don't require medical coverage, and then that starts on page 6. That would be the all-inclusive without medical coverage. The bottom highlighted number, again, assuming an August 1st date, is the $74,463.
And that's all of those positions you just listed, building commissioner, plumbing, heating, electrical. That's the total for all of that.
Correct, for the period of the pilot.
That's 6 months of the total cost of the town of Southampton. 74,000, or is that?
That would be from August 1st until June 30th.
1 year.
So 11
So
months.
11 months.
11, so that's the total cost of the town, 74,000.
Correct.
The one above it at 81, for instance, is a full year, if you want to extrapolate using that.
Correct. Yep. That, assuming, again, no medical coverage, that the employee selected as a Southampton inspector does not need medical coverage. That's where the variable comes in on the next page. This assumes that they need the single plan, so that which would be the PPO with Health New England, and those are the employer share numbers in blue. So a prorating, if they need the single coverage, it goes up to 77,000. And then the next page, the only change is a family plan on the PPO, which would be Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the most expensive plan. Out of the 1,342 employees that utilize the medical insurance in Holyoke, we have 5 people that take this plan. So people take this plan because they want coverage in Connecticut, if they live in Connecticut.
Can we make them use our plan that's cheaper? Is that something we could talk about?
I can talk to the law department.
Our most expensive plan that we have is 13,000. The town cost, well, for the town, we pay 13,000. So actually, this is.
Right, so this is less.
But it's, what's the rate over there? How much do you pay? How much is?
What's your split?
On the PPOs, it's 50-50. On the HMOs, it's 60-40.
Okay, so our split is more favorable to an employee.
What are we at, 75?
No, we are at 70-30, I believe. Does that sound right? Anyone for finance? No jumping? I want to say it's 70-30, but don't hold me to that. I don't speak.
Is Southampton in the GIC?
Is Southampton what?
In the GIC?
No, we are Hampshire, yeah, not Hitchcock, what is it, Hampshire? Is it Hitchcock?
So that's page 8. Now you get to page 9, and this changes, this is option B. So this is option B, removes the all-inclusive coverage of the plumbing and gas inspector and the electrical inspector. And then then you would have, so you remove them from the fixed cost, or the guaranteed number, knowing what the guaranteed number is. You can still utilize them, but it's at a rate of $40 per inspection, whether it's a first, second, third, or fourth inspection. If some of your fees are $60, if that's on a second, third, or fourth inspection, you would retain those fees. And that $40 comes out to, it's a variable of their time and a half rate plus mileage. And again, we run through the same scenario. Numbers without medical coverage, numbers with the best single plan, and then numbers with the most expensive family plan.
Could we keep our plumbing and gas and electrical inspectors and have them work under your commissioner? Is that possible?
We could certainly discuss it. So in essence, they would remain employee, well, they're not employee, I believe you're paying them through accounts payable, so you're 1099ing them at the end of the year for tax purposes, right?
We do, I think we just 1099 the alternates, but I think the regulars are on payroll.
On payroll, that's where the sticky point would be, is if they're under the direct supervision of the Hoyle Commissioner, but yet being compensated by the town of Southampton. I didn't have the law department explore that, and
You guys were doing that for us before.
as a temporary alternate
You
plan,
guys were doing it before when Rich was having, he was just a building inspector and not a commissioner. So,
right, our commissioner was covering,
commissioner was covering,
correct, and the law allows that,
okay.
but when you go down to an inspector,
But who covers the inspector? If Rich was the inspector, was the commissioner covering the plumbing inspector and
it's all under the commissioner's name and license.
So we did do that in the past then? You could say that we did do that in the past where the Holyoke commissioner was supervising our electrical inspector that's being paid through Southampton. So you were.
I follow
doing
you,
that before.
yep.
So, I mean, maybe it has to be sort of, I'm no attorney, I'm not that smart. But maybe that's something that could be looked at. That would save money, right?
You know, everything's something to look into, but.
A question, right now we pay the inspectors by electrical, plumbing.
We pay them in a revolving fund. So
Right, but the-
essentially what happens, this is my best understanding, please correct me if I'm incorrect on this. This is as of a refresher at 3 o'clock. So my understanding is that the electrical inspector gets $40 per inspection regardless, because I believe that's approximately 80% of the fees, for most of the fees he collects anyway, but he gets 40%. The plumbing, gas.
$40 or
$40, sorry, I keep changing. See, I'm not accounting, that's not my job. I'm not good at that. As far as the electrical and, the gas and plumbing inspector, they get 80% as well of the first inspection. I believe they collect the entire second inspection. Does that sound right, Jackie? You're saying, that's okay. That's my understanding. The second inspection, they collect the entire thing, was my understanding. But the first inspection, it varies. So if you're going to a place and it's $100, they're getting, $80? If you're going to a place and say it's $200, which I don't think we have anything that is, they're getting a much larger portion. But without a smaller fixed rate, what happens is we lose money. The proposal he has, last year I think we paid about $15,000 revolving in one account and $18,000 revolving in the other. And that's not split to how much we actually made in the fees. I'm not sure what the amount is, but I can guarantee you it's much smaller.
So there was $33,000 plus the fees that the inspectors got.
Well, that is what we paid out the inspectors.
the-
So we don't know what we took in for our intake.
Yeah, what I liked about the proposal is we get to keep all the fees. And also, you'll look at the different permit costs and kind of right-size them, if you will, if they're too low. So there was a couple good items in here. And I know our inspector we're paying now is $50,000 for building inspector commissioner. And when you add benefits and all that on here, you're at $75,000, $80,000, so.
So that was my question. Do we have any numbers?
Yes, we do.
that
So
would be
we did a comparison earlier. I can always do it on the chalkboard if I must, but I'd rather just tell you.
Can you match that comparison to what's in this paper?
I can match it sort of. John does a very elaborate sheet, and I'm not an accountant or a treasurer, so that is not my skill set. But I can match numbers relatively. So it looked like one of the numbers he referred to was the base pay of $51,272. I think I took one of the highest paid sheets because I wanted to go with the highest number that he proposed in our numbers. So $51,272 was their proposal. We paid $50,000 for our base pay. The health care they have on that line was $12,603. We have $13,000 at our highest that we would pay out. Dental, they have $528. If you have the PPO, then you are eligible for the Delta Dental here, and that's $725 that the town contributes. Retirement, we can't figure out our piece precisely. What ends up happening with ours, just so you know, is they essentially take the aggregate amount of all the salaries and they give us a lump sum of what we owe. They don't divide it based on, you know, well, John makes X amount of dollars and therefore his contribution piece is Y. We just know what we pay at the end of the year. We don't have it based out per employee. So I don't have an answer for that one. So that one I just had 0, which you're going to see how that plays out. In Holyoke, it's $2,843 for retirement. Is it FICA?
Yeah, the 1.45.
FICA Holyoke has $743. We have $620. For mileage, Holyoke has $2,938 based on what we were paying our prior building commissioner at a rate of $200 per month, because it actually apparently came out cheaper to what he was actually using for mileage, was $2,400. So the totals there for Holyoke is $70,927. For Southampton, $64,345. But please mind, that does not include the retirement, which is probably a couple thousand. When you look at the gas inspector and plumbing, you figure that's $33,000 on our part between the two for the revolving funds this year. And on Holyoke, their proposal of $7,500 for overtime and $9,000, and it comes to $16,500. When you look at the total packages together, Holyoke's was $87,427, and Southampton's was $97,345.
Can I throw one comment in there?
I'm sorry?
One comment on that is we've got to look at costs that aren't included here. When the building inspector's gone, when he's on sick time, all the coverage that we do for these folks is not included in our cost estimate. So that, our cost goes well over.
Well, it only affects us in the building commissioner department, because with the inspectors it doesn't, because the inspector gets the same rate as the alternates.
Right.
Actually, you know what, I don't know, I don't think so. I thought the alternates get per hour as well. I think they do get per hour.
So those costs are buried somewhere else. So that makes the spread a lot different.
What about enforcement?
So enforcement, it would somewhat be two-pronged to start with. Is first, the Hoyoke Building Commissioner would get himself brought up to speed on what exactly your zoning rules and regulations are. He said they're going to be different than Hoyoke's, but they all revert back to Mass General Law. And then he'll work with getting the local inspector up to speed on what they are. He, in there, one of the bullet points is he'll prepare standardized letters for the typical enforcements that need to be done. And then on the schedule, the local inspector would be assigned to enforcement/inspection. So if there are no inspections, you should be doing enforcement. Monday through Thursday, 9:30 a.m. till noon. So immediately following office hours. And then an extended period of time on Thursday, ending with office hours at 4:30. That's on page 5. Again, I don't do zoning or enforcement. According, talking with our building commissioner, a lot of it is you just have to become familiar with the streets and the neighborhoods and know that that shed wasn't there a week ago, or it's in the process of being built. And since the local building inspector is going to be the one signing off the permits and dealing with it daily with the building commissioner, they're going to know whether or not they approved a permit for XYZ College Highway or not.
What would be our next step? Because I think you're looking for some sort of interest, confirmation that we want to go forward or something like that, right?
I do have a question for
Josh?
thanks. You're listening to all of this, and is this something that you can help us to figure out, or is this somewhere where you step back and let us know?
No, yeah, again, DLTA funds would be available to assist, provide the necessary technical assistance necessary that you guys may need assistance with. I know I was explaining to John when he brought this idea up was, for instance, developing the IMA can take, hiring a legal attorney to come in and be able to draft that IMA for you, so that we're not spending staff time of the city solicitors, who probably has many other responsibilities to take care of, and DLTA funds can pay for that. So those are the kind of things that you'll be able to utilize DLTA funds from the PVPC, absolutely.
If we decided to use those funds, that puts us off till January 1 again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the calendar year of the DLTA doesn't coincide with, the fiscal year towns follow.
And so can somebody just tell me maybe a general amount of money that we're thinking we might save? Can you tell me that number?
Well, based on the most calculation, it was 10 grand. But that's, using the whole package. It's different. I mean, the amount for the building commissioner looks initially higher than what we would spend. However, if you look at the inspector pieces, that's about 50%. So it depends on what you're looking for. You're looking for the whole package. Are you looking for piecemeal? What is the goal? What's your objective?
What about a pilot until the end of the fiscal year?
Well, that's what John had proposed.
We could do
Doing it from August 1st essentially until the end. The only problem we run into is depending on what you want to do. For instance, if you want to do the inspectors, then right now it comes from revolving funds, so we have to go back to town meeting, dissolve the revolving fund, and put it into essentially some kind of payroll account, salary account, or whatever we're going to end up utilizing to pay. We have to figure out paying all kinds of
Well,
things like that.
if it's done, again, I'm not the lawyer, but if it's done as a pilot, all the payments are still going to be made out to the town of Southampton. So couldn't they continue to be made, during the period of the pilot, continue to be made into that revolving fund, and then we would invoice monthly, and that, I'm assuming you could issue an AP check out of the revolving fund?
We can look into it. I don't know anything about revolving funds except for the word. So, again, finance is not my specialty. I will be very coy with you on that one, but we will look into it.
We could also, I mean, one of the difficulties we had with this is trying to hone in on the inspector, the electrical and plumbing inspectors, is we have the total, we're provided the total number of permits issued, but we don't know what the permits were for. Whether there were 50 permits for the $20 charge or 50 permits for the $100 charge. And then, so depending on how the board wants to go, maybe the option is the pilot on option B, and you continue to hold your local inspector, your plumbing, gas, electrical inspector, and get better data, and then reevaluate that piece towards the end of the pilot and see whether or not.
I mean, one thing, that's what I was gonna suggest, is go with the building inspector if we go with a pilot, and the funds will be available after January, and we can use some of those funds to have them look into the other inspectors. And by the time we get to the end of the pilot, we'll say, the building inspector was a great idea, and here's what we can gain by the electrical and plumbing.
But just remember that the building inspector alone, that piece appears to cost us more money. That's if the person goes through the full health care and the like.
Well,
And that does put us over what we're currently paying now by $6,000.
well,
It might be slightly less depending on what we pay for retirement.
let's go back. It looks like if we go with the lowest cost, or the highest cost is $76,000. We're paying $50,000 for salary right now, and then you're adding $13,000 on for insurance, so that's 63. Then you're adding these other items on there. What we're not talking about is we're getting all these permit fees back to the town, so that's going to reduce our costs, plus all these double coverages that we're paying for right now when there's vacation, holiday, sick time. We save all that too.
When you say permit fees back to the town, you're talking about the inspector's fees? Because
Yeah.
the building commissioners, we get 100% of the fees anyway.
I thought there was a split on the building
No,
inspector.
we get all of the building commissioner fees.
But a building inspector fees?
That's the same thing as building commissioner. We get all those fees already.
Okay.
Those are ours.
So there's
You
no
get the
fees
salary.
There's absolutely no split in the fees for the
No,
building inspector?
That's 100%
Okay.
ours.
So it'd be the coverage when he's on vacation and
Yes,
sick
and
time.
even still that, I mean, one would argue that according to our PP bylaws or EP, whatever,
PQB.
yeah. the bylaws we currently have that pertain to personnel, how it's currently written until such time that's revised is one doesn't get vacation for the first year. So unless someone takes time off unpaid, the alternate coverage should be minimal.
For the first
Or
year.
theoretically, if the person does take time off because they're taking it off unpaid, then we have the coverage of money to pay for the person who needs to fill in.
That's a short-term view on it. That's the first year. Sick time, they'll take. So,
Southampton not entitled, I don't think they're entitled to anything the first year. But the law,
well,
they might,
they should accrue as an employee. They
I
should
don't think
accrue
it's
from day
written
one.
that way, but.
Has the finance committee had a chance to look at any of this or have an opinion? No?
You want this comment?
I think it's an opportunity to look at something.
No, to have. You guys can disseminate to yourselves. Yeah. You're welcome.
So you're suggesting to just take the building commissioner part?
Well, I would, if we're gonna start anywhere, I'd start just with that, because why take on more than we can handle? And the opportunity's there because we don't have a building commissioner right now. You know, we won't displace any of the others, or attempt to do that. The vacancy is an opportunity, the way I look at it. At least to study it.
Would anyone in the audience like to let us know? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just have a question.
Could you introduce yourself, sir?
My name's Jim Boyle. One of the things that you're talking about here, regionalizing this and local inspector here, there's a lot of things that certainly have to be involved, and maybe a lot of things got overlooked, is the fact that the town builds about 20 houses a year, maybe 22. As of now, there's 22 building permits out in place that are paid for. So really, there won't be a lot of that 37 or possibly 35,000 is not going to be there for the next year for any inspector to deal with because it's already gone. It's done. As far as you know, the generation of permits, fees and taxes and stuff like that. Every time a permit's taken for, say, a storage building, a deck, or something like that, there's also a tax that comes with that later. Goes over to the assessor and stuff like that. If you don't have somebody local in place to take care of this, like you had in the past, you've always had your local inspector in town, lived in town, or very close. So he'd be driving through town, he sees a pool going in, he sees a shack going up, he stops, sends out a letter. If you've got somebody from out of town, their base is to come in town, do an inspection, and go away. Or at least at night. When you need emergency at night, you need an inspector to go do somebody's disaster, I guess a apartment burns or something like that. It's maybe not your disaster, but it's somebody else's. So you need this inspector to go look at this to see if it's habitable or whatever the case is to get this guy back in. Can you get that out of Hoyle? Can you get it out of Springfield or whoever you're looking at? I think in the best interest of the town, it still should be handled under the jurisdiction of you people to control that inspector at all times, because that's the way it's been done. It's fair to the people. I worked in Hoyle. I did some construction over there. I know the building inspector. I know the assistant building inspector. I didn't see anybody else there except the secretary. So if there is multiple inspectors, they weren't as building officials or whatever. So that's that case. But I think that you had a good prospect here. You look like you, through the meetings, you look like you voted to hire this guy, then this came about, which I guess you look at all things for cost. But the person you hired didn't have particularly the proper credentials at the time, but he did have the credentials to get the license. That's not true with most people. They just can't go and say, I'm going to get a building official's license. You've got to get approved by the state. He had that. You're also covered by a good building official, which originally was from Hoyoke, I believe, is over in Long Meadow now, Paul Healy. In fact, he did an inspection for me last week, and he's on vacation this week. But that's part of that case of you do have a good candidate right now he should be looked at closely. He certainly looked like, to me, like he was hired when I saw it on TV. I was surprised this all came about, but I'm not gonna hold you up all night. There's a million permit processes that gotta go through, from wood stoves to closing of houses. When you got a wood stove, you gotta get an inspection by the building inspector. I know our guy Richie, when he was here, he used to go out on Saturdays, he'd meet the people on Sundays. That's the way it operated in a small town. So I guess that we are small town people, and that's the way it is. So I guess that before a decision is made to hire an outside inspector with Holyoke, I know they're good people, but at the same token, I believe that we should keep it right here under our roof. Everybody else is here. I just believe it's hard for change right now. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. George?
I just wanted to ask, how much money was generated by that department, the Richard Rand, the inspector? How much did he generate? Since he was a salary person, all the money he brought in, he got 100%.
Yeah, it just depends on what permits he had pulled that time and how
Well,
much,
no,
but I know
yeah.
the week prior to him leaving, there was approximately, give or take, 30 building permits pulled.
I'm talking overall, let's say the year before, how much money did they generate?
I don't know the answer.
Did that department generate?
We would still get that, though.
50, 60, 100,000?
We would still get that. George, we would still get that. The
I
fees,
know that. What I'm trying to find out is how much he did generate.
in enforcement or permits?
Permits, all of it, all of the above.
I couldn't tell you, George, but whatever he did,
We got 100%.
we got 100%.
Oh, yeah.
We would get 100% with this plan as
I
well.
agree.
Yeah.
Right? Or we lose, like he said, we lose local control. We lose local control. True. Right? That's all I have to say about it. All right?
Linda Saunders, 23 Helen Drive. I think it's very interesting that there's, every time a different process or procedure is presented, we hear that it's a local control or small town, and yet it was recently demonstrated in a small town, taxpayers don't want to pay for these services. Therefore, we have to look at any way we can cut our expenses, and that is just the way it is at this point. You want to have all this local talent utilized, then I suggest the taxpayers start paying for it.
Thank you.
A couple of questions, and to address what Mr. Boyle said too. The gentleman we had lives in Hadley, so he wouldn't be a local person, and he had 2 months' experience at the time in a small town as a building inspector. He was a builder, worked for a builder in Hadley, so he didn't have any local connections, and he didn't really have any experience as a building inspector. We wouldn't lose local control because we'd have a person sitting in that office that would be fully trained, a lot more so than somebody we take off the street, I think. And they'd have the hours, they'd have the backup. We would have the depth of a department that is very rich in, I think, experience. And when you went to the town inspector's office, there was nobody else there. I'm hoping that they were all out doing inspections. That's what their job is, to go out there and do inspections, not kind of sit around. So I think we do keep control. We keep the person here that'll be working with us, and we would have, more experience, I think, on board than we're ever going to find by hiring out there on our own.
John, when you talk about, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, when you talk about control, what about oversight? Say there are complaints or something like that, how much
It would come to us.
How much control would we have if this is somebody who's working under a different commissioner? How much is Southampton, say that there's an inspector that's assigned here, not working out. The guy's a jerk, okay? He's pissing everybody off. What kind of control do we have to get rid of him?
Part of it would be how we craft the intermunicipal agreement that would cover this. But without the legalese or legal eyes, I would say that this board would retain day-to-day control from appointing authority group, but when it came to matters of mass general law, and this is what the law says, this is what we have to do, that in fairness would have to fall on the building commissioner whose name and license was on the line.
If there was a dispute between, say, a building owner and the inspector, that would be duked out in Holyoke and not here, or?
No, I would think, well, I would think if the Board of Selectmen wanted that this would be their first avenue, which I believe it currently is. Their first avenue of recourse has come to the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator. That would all stay. It would just be a matter of, I guess where I'm coming from is that part would stay, but if the Board of Selectmen, for example, if you had a building that was falling down and you said it's got to stay, and it was going to, hypothetically, collapse on a nursery, and you said it had to stay, and the commissioner said it has to come down, well, the law is going to side on the commissioner's point of view, so it's just going to come down for public safety. But as long as the local inspector I guess it's a either a dotted or solid line to you and the opposite to the building commissioner. But I think all that could be worked out in the agreement to the extent, as long as it's as much control as you want to have, we'll build into the agreement. Just short of...
You know, we're definitely a service organization. That's what the town is for the taxpayers in the town. So I just want to make sure that we have some sort of ability to remind the person who's working for the citizens of Southampton that is a service. It's a service, you know, enterprise here, and then we have to sort of keep that in mind.
Right, and ultimately...
Sure that happens.
Right, and ultimately you guys have to stand before your constituents, and so you need to be able to have some oversight over that process, regardless of who it is, whether it's contracting with us or whether it's another employee that you bring in. Yeah.
Have we had any conversations with Easthampton or surrounding towns about the same?
No, we have not.
We don't know if anybody else can.
I imagine if they're interested, they'd probably contact us, but we can try to reach out. The problem is that we're finding is we don't know who to reach out to. See, John is the treasurer. One would not think John's gonna reach out or be the person to contact about a building commissioner position. If I contact the building commissioner's office in Easthampton, it's the employer of the gentleman that the board had originally voted to look into hiring. So that might be a conflict of interest and also an opportunity where the current building commissioner says, I'm not talking to you. We could try, but there's always a possibility it's not going to necessarily go the way the board would like it to go.
Now, getting back to what Mr. Boyle said, if the majority of the building permits have been pulled for the year, would it make sense to start this program starting next fiscal year and get someone in the position for now and then start an agreement next year with Holyoke? Does that make sense?
But I think if your permits are pulled now, that means you're in the middle of construction. So I guess the question would be, who's doing all those inspections? Because someone has to do the inspections as they're going on and before they finish it. I mean, there's the initial approval of the plans, which I believe has been done if the permit's been pulled. So that part's been done. But now the
actual work is now. Okay.
Right.
So the other thing to keep in mind is Paul's been very gracious. He's now been on for most of the month of July, and at some point he's going to get worn out because he does have a full-time job, and he was originally only the alternate, only being called in opportunities when Rich was unavailable. But now Paul has two jobs, Long Meadow and Southampton. So he's going to wear out and burn out very quickly, especially as some of those building permits come to fruition and he has to do more frequent inspections in each of those properties. So I don't know how long we're going to be able to retain Paul's full committed services before he gets burnt out to the point where he says, no, he said he would do this for a temporary period of time. And I think to him that seemed to be on the 1 to 2 months because at the time we were interviewing and things looked hopeful. He was very excited at that prospect. But to go back and tell him, A, either you have to wait on another year, I think he's going to say thank you, but no thank you. B, to even tell him he has to wait another 3 months, I think he's going to say pretty much the same thing. So unless we come back with a definitive, okay, Paul, you're relieved as of such and such a date, or this is our best guess, you know, he needs to have hope in sight that this isn't going to be a permanent job.
John, when could you ramp up? When would you be able to provide services for Southampton?
Well, the immediate services of the building commissioner could start as soon as the agreement was signed or there was a tentative agreement in place. We would need the executed agreement to finalize the selection of the local inspector and assign that person. But the building commissioner and the assistant building commissioner would be available to start in that short intermediate period of time. The procedurally wise, I believe that we still have to get whatever resolution we come through here, it then has to go through our city council. So I'll just leave it at that.
So how often does your city council meet, John?
They're in summer recess. They'll meet next Tuesday.
Summer recess.
Yeah. Yeah, so they'll meet next Tuesday, and then they won't meet again until the first Tuesday in September.
And what's the deadline to get something on the agenda? Is it 48 hours prior? Do they have?
Right, it's Friday at noon.
Okay,
To
so
meet this
if there was
Tuesday's
a
agenda.
resolution made this evening, it could easily go on next week's agenda.
Correct. And the other, just as far as cost, you know, if working under option B, where we're only talking about the first phase of it, that's based on an assumption of a 4-day work week here. You know, that's an assumption that I made. You may feel differently, that the constituents may not want full 4 days. They may want 3, and then that could be an adjustment down based on that. The other thing for mileage, if your historical number is 2,400 and ours was 2,938, we could, I don't see an issue there, billing for the mileage as it's actually incurred, not to exceed the 2,938. So if it never gets up to that amount, then you don't have to pay that out.
Next question. The agreement we do, I mean, I'm familiar with doing service level agreements and SLAs, if you will, which I imagine we would do in this case. So we would have if we have issues with a particular person, the SLA would give us ways to go back and exchange that person, if you will, for somebody that's more compatible. But if anybody has any concerns, can we put a term in there that says we have the option of canceling with 60-day notice if we find this isn't working for the town within this August 1st to June 30th with the proper notice? That way, I think would help people say, okay, we're not committing for 11 months, we're going to go at it and give it our best shot, and if after 6 months, for some reason it's not working, we have an out beforehand, which 60 days, 90 days.
I think I'd make a motion to proceed, because it sounds like we're sort of stuck at this point. So I'll proceed and see if the city council agrees to proceed and work out their deals.
With option A or option B?
With the whole department or just the building commissioner?
The savings is better with the whole
The
department?
savings is better with the whole department. When you just do the building commissioner, we actually possibly lose money depending on how much we pay towards retirement.
So I would go with the most cost savings option.
Is there a second?
I'm going to second it just for a conversation, okay?
Other discussion. Heather?
I just have one question, John. How would you, how would you go about figuring out who to hire for the local inspector? Would Holyoke be in charge of interviewing? Would you take into consideration interviews the board has already done? How would you assess that? Who would be doing it? Who has the final hiring decision over in Holyoke?
Well, if it's under the commissioner, they're going to be the appointing. Isn't that how it goes, or are we going to be the appointing body?
I believe the building commissioner is the appointing authority. No.
That's the whole
Oh.
other bylaw.
Right, so actually, I just got corrected, one of the solicitors is in the back. In Holyoke, it's the mayor. So again, if the agreement, it's whatever the agreement says would trump it. So if the agreement says that this board is the final hiring authority or in conjunction with the building commissioner, then that's what we do. If the agreement is silent, then it's a recommendation of the building commissioner to the mayor.
So there could be some way that if the board proceeds and decides to go forward, that in building the agreement, we would come up with some direction of the hiring. So, you know, you could say, okay, maybe there's these people from Holyoke that are in charge of the hiring portion, and these people from Southampton sit at the same time, so everyone's in agreement on the hiring of this position.
Correct. Yes.
We should be able to build into that.
Yeah, I think the stronger you make the agreement, the better it is in your position. Because again, wherever it falls silent will fall back to the city charter.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I think it's a good idea just to at least try this regionalization. It's a pilot program that goes through May. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If it does work out, then we've had 6 months to sort of tweak it, moving forward for another agreement next summer.
Can I ask a question? I'm not, off the top of my head, in favor of doing all of them at once. I'm more in favor of doing the building inspector. From your point of view, ramping up, getting everybody on board, is that a lot more effort on your part rather than just getting a building inspector, getting that person ramped up?
That would be the only piece that's missing. Everything else would be ready to kick in immediately upon passage.
Not catching it. What do you mean?
So as far as like the individual inspectors, that would be utilization of existing staff.
Okay, so they just
With
come
their
over
alternate, right.
your time.
Yep, so, which are already listed on the org chart with their alternates.
So the people that are currently in those other positions here
Would be out.
would be out.
Take a vote?
I have a motion and a second. I'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I feel, I disagree with you on, it's not gonna save any money, so I'm gonna say no, because I'd rather go with just a building inspector, but still passes.
So we'll move forward and send that information along and get it on the agenda for the city council in Hoyoke.
Yes, and then the next step, if we approve it, would be to come back with a contract before the board of selectmen, working with both city and town together to see what we can come up with.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, guys, for sitting through this.
This is easy. Come to Hoyoke.
Can we ask our silent partners back there from Hoyoke?
Oh,
Who's our silent partner from Hoyoke?
Oh,
I'm Attorney Carol from the law department.
Oh, hi, how are you?
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for sitting through this.
I'm gonna jump ahead
Nice to meet you.
to the financial plan update and report from the finance committee.
Amanda, would you like to say anything, or?
Well, we've been meeting and working on drafting a long-term financial plan. It's been the finance committee in conjunction with Heather has come, Vicky has come, Donna has come. And so we have a draft that Linda has put together that we'd like you guys to look at to see if we're going in the direction that you want us to before we continue to pursue, you know, and do more research and really develop.
We have a copy here on the agenda, do
I've
you
got a
know?
copy right there. So we were looking to have you guys review it and give us some feedback before we go any further. If there are things you want us to add, things you want us to take out.
There are a lot of good long-term financial plans on the internet from other towns in Massachusetts.
Thank you.
And this is just a very rough outline, but you can see that we're looking at 5-year projections. We'll be looking at them for revenues and expenses. We want to develop guidelines for spending and provide other recommendations. We need your feedback, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, to just let us know if we're on the right track. We want to make this a public document to make our financial situation very clear. I anticipate using, bar graphs and pie charts and various ways of looking at financial information so it's a little more understandable. There's a wonderful book called The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, and that's kind of my
That sounds like some light beach reading.
Anyway, so if you could take a look at this, let us know if this is what you're looking for. And we'll get to work and divvy up the work among us and hopefully get it done within the next couple of months. But we do want to look out 5 years. I believe unless you have a roadmap and some goals,
Yes.
who knows where you're going to end up. And as we all know, we're in rather dire straits right now.
It's, from my experience, it's always been sort of patch
Right.
every year.
We can't do that anymore. We've run out of
Patches.
So,
Linda, on this one with the Hampshire Regional, what's your thought process on the Hampshire Regional? I noticed that bulletin, because that's a
That's a
lion's share,
region.
yeah, it's a lion's share of our.
well, I looked up the original agreement. I got it from the education department, and Heather and I have talked about that. I don't know how easy it would be to revisit that agreement, but I really feel it would be only fair to propose weighted voting on the budget. We have the majority of students, we provide the majority of funds for Hampshire Regional. I think we should have more input on the budget. This last year, not this this year, but last year we faced a $500,000 increase in one fell swoop. And that was just, that wiped us out. That set the scene for disaster for 2 years.
Do you know of any other regional school systems where it's weighted voting? Do you know of any?
I don't know. We need to look into this. Heather said she would work on it with us and talk to some other town administrators and see, get more information on the background and how we might approach it.
There's no expiration or date for renewal on that at all, it's just an agreement and that's
Not
it?
that I'm aware of. It could be amended, but, you've got to get an agreement to amend, so.
Question?
Depends on how we go about it.
I had asked Heather to send me a copy, but I haven't gotten one yet. Do you get it electronically, the agreement, Hampshire?
Yeah, I got it, from the, I'll see if you want me to forward it to you. I have it in my computer.
That'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
And she wasn't sure that there might have been more amendments since then, but I think it spells it out pretty basically. So that's something we really need to look at.
What about the Quinn bill?
Well, there apparently has been a movement from local legislators to pressure the state to change that, at least pay their share, or else allow local communities to drop it if they don't want to pay it or can't pay it. The latter is pretty much our position, but something needs to be done about that too.
These are all just, if they're ideas based on discussions that we've had, things that we should look at. Obviously nothing's set in stone, it's just a draft. If anything you want to comment on, add, don't think that we really can change, that's what we want back from you, that kind of feedback.
Did you happen to, Amanda, did you happen to talk to Hank Barton or look at the master plan at all? For some of these aspects, because you're talking about planning out 5 and 10 years and whatnot.
Yeah, because there's almost no financial aspect to it. It's a wonderful plan, but.
But like there's goals, but there's some financial costs, so is that part of?
No information on how you pay for it.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Okay.
So, but it should be melded in some way. All these documents should be working documents. They all should be updated regularly, particularly a financial plan. It should be reviewed every year and updated.
Do you think setting aside, like, what I've found out is that the budget process, yeah, we should start, it's January. Yeah, we should probably look at that. It's February. Yeah, well, when we start talking to department heads, yeah, it's March. Well, we should really get this on the agenda.
Well, we're working with Heather on that. It's going to start this fall.
It has to be, in my mind, it just has to be a certain process that's set, and that's what you do.
That's right, and that's what we're trying to do. We want to codify it. We want to make it very user-friendly in terms of, how we gather the data and make it a lot earlier than it has been in the past.
It would, in my mind, it would make it, because everything's sort of, this is, we all get elected and we do our time here, we try to help the town as best we can, but things change. It'd be an interesting step to say, have a town meeting where they say, this is the expected financial plan and have the town vote on it, and now it's said, that, the taxpayer said, this is how you do the budget every year. It's gone on this, by this date, you have to have sat down and done this, your budget for next year is set down, it has to be in by this, and it's all.
Absolutely. I will hope we can achieve a great deal more transparency in the budget process for the taxpayers and information available to them a lot earlier so that they can be much better informed voters.
So if we take a look at this and get some ideas back to you.
Yeah, whether you want to just drop some stuff, add some stuff, things that you think are going to work at all, let us know. This is very preliminary.
So I should try and get you back on the agenda maybe in a month and revisit, is that wrong? Or would you prefer 2 weeks?
Well, your feedback, if we could get it in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so why don't we have Heather put it back on the agenda for our next meeting? So everybody on the board needs to take a look and come back with notes and feedback by our next meeting.
That would be very helpful. If we can, so we can try to get somewhere near close to Heather's goal date of late September. I think that's a little ambitious, but,
We'll get back to you in 2 weeks, and we'll be a little farther ahead, right?
How's the free cash certification coming along?
I don't know.
We
but,
haven't seen Vicki.
yeah.
Vicky's working and closing out the book. She's aiming for the 1st of September.
How's it look?
Oh, you want the amount? I don't know. I don't know that. Based on my guesstimation, I was thinking what we had before, which was the 102,000. That's obviously 5, so we know we're getting at least 102,000.
Okay.
And then I think we matched it, and that was it, if that. But again, I don't do accounting.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, ladies, I appreciate your work.
Now we're gonna move on to more from Mrs. Kemp, because she'd like to talk about the special municipal employee designation. Ready, go.
Well, Heather asked me to come, and I'm guessing it's because I've had a lot of conversations with the Ethics Commission, with Randy getting hired as the highway superintendent, me serving on the Finance Committee, and also appearing in front of boards. So I'm guessing she's having difficulty getting in touch with them. She wanted me to relay to you the information I've been given by them. So essentially, I had done a lot of research, and so had Randy when we ran into the situation when he became, the highway superintendent, and we wanted to know what we could and couldn't do with me serving on the Finance Committee, and he's also on the Conservation Commission. And so we got the list of what is considered special town employees, because what you can and can't do in front of boards in town depends upon your status.
You got that list from the Ethics Commission.
What
You got the list of?
No, the list that the town clerk had, that we got from Eileen.
Okay.
And it had, like a handful of boards on it.
We set that up, we sort of
And
asked,
it was a vote, it was a vote that had been taken by the select board, because the select board establishes who's going to be, what committees, what boards are going to be considered special town employees.
What year?
What?
Do you know what year that was?
I don't know.
I think it changes as I think we've done it a couple times.
The
Maybe
list she gave me, I think was over 10 years old, and that was the only list she could find at the time.
Okay.
It had the school, building committee on it, which doesn't even exist anymore. And so it was interesting because there are an awful lot of committees and boards in town that are not considered special town employees. So if I was to serve on the historical commission, for example, I technically could not appear in front of any board in town. That's what you're denied doing, and there really isn't a conflict of interest being, I don't think for the most part, being on the historical commission and going in front of the planning board, necessarily, or in front of the select board. And so it was a strange list, and I don't know if it came up as people ran into situations or wanted to serve on boards, is how the list was formulated. And my conversation with the Ethics Commission, they said to me, in a town of our size, it's usually either all or none. And they say the reason it's usually all is because you're very limited then on who can serve on your boards. Essentially anybody, any type of professional who has business in town can't serve on any type of board. You're limiting the people who can volunteer to be on committees in town. So, with that being said, I think it may be time, and I know I've talked to Heather about this, I think we've talked about this a little bit, Liz, is you may want to revisit what boards are considered special town employees and what you want to add to it, because it is a very limited list right now.
You have a copy of that list?
I do not have a copy of that list.
what's your thoughts on it, Heather?
I concur with Amanda.
So do you think we should just take a vote and make everybody a special municipal employee? All boards, PQB, all of them?
I think if we made all of them, what we could do is if the board was so inclined, they could take a vote to, at this time, designate all boards, committees, commissions within the town as special municipal employees, subject to any disagreements by town council. So if I run it by town council, they say yes to everyone but these two, then we modify it, but if they have no objection, then we're all set to roll.
And if I can, just to point out, just because you make a board or a commission a special, like everybody on it a special town employee, doesn't mean that they can just do whatever they want. What it means is now they file a disclosure with whoever their governing board is. So with the finance committee, it's the town clerk because we're elected officials. And so if I was going to appear in front of someone, I have to file a disclosure. If I was going to appear as a lawyer for someone, I have to file a disclosure that says, here's what I'm doing, here's the board I'm going in front of, and here's the compensation I'm going to receive, so that anybody can come in and see what I filed. And so that's what it allows people to do, to still appear, but disclose what their conflict of interest might be, or how they're going to be compensated for whatever it is they're doing. If it's a board that's governed by the select board, then they come to you, which I know Randy had done. He had to come to you and file a disclosure. You had to review it and tell him it was okay to take certain action. So that's what it allows people to do. It just doesn't allow them to do whatever they want. It means now they have the right to do this with a disclosure.
What are the repercussions if someone doesn't file a disclosure?
Then if someone files a complaint, there can be financial penalties.
For the town or for that person?
For that person, for that individual.
Okay.
And so it may make someone less inclined to want to,
Right.
serve. I mean, we have enough trouble as it is, getting people to serve on boards, and now you've limited who can serve.
Right.
Well, I'd be inclined to follow Heather's lead and make a motion as such, and then wait to see if town council has any reservations.
Is there a second?
I'd like to ask Robert what he feels about it.
Sure. Robert, would you like to give any opinion about this?
It opens a can of worms.
This is as a moderator, or
Robert Floyd, 50 East Street.
is that moderator or as private citizen?
I'm speaking as a private citizen.
Okay.
As an address to the moderator. It opens a can of worms. We've seen situations where it aids, it helps, it frees someone up, and then it has the reverse. So my recommendation is to think about it. Don't rush to judgment. This is something that's going to affect everyone in the future that serves the town. And it has worked as it is, with some exceptions. But again, as you did today, consider, how it could backfire.
What are the repercussions of continuing the way we are now? What would happen if we do just wait for someone to come and ask to be appointed as a?
Well, I think what Amanda was saying, not to put words in what you said, that the ethics said either all or none, is what the ethics was saying.
In a town our size, that's normal. You either put everybody in or you put nobody in.
So that's what I'm looking at. So we want to be as normal as possible. I know that's impossible to be completely normal, but more normal.
It's unusual. At the time I had the list, and I think I gave it to someone, and that's why I don't have it anymore. But at the time, they asked me, they said, well, who's on, what boards? And I said, that's it? And I said, yeah. And it was not an inclusive list. It was a very limited list. And I bet you it was based on people who wanted to serve and came to the select board and said, I really want to do this. I want you to appoint me, but I can't because of such and such. I mean, does it open a can of worms? I don't know that that's necessarily the case. There are still ethics rules in place. There are still things you cannot do. You're not allowed to do, even if you are a special municipal employee. And all someone has to do is call the ethics commission and report what they think is a potential violation. So it doesn't necessarily, like I said, it doesn't give you it's not open season. You still can't appear in front of you're not supposed to, I believe one of the rules is you're not supposed to appear in front of your own board. I mean, there are things you still can't do, whether or not you're a special municipal employee. It doesn't change that.
I think hearing Heather, I think what might be good is to find out what town council has first before a vote. And I believe there used to be something to the effect that nobody could serve on 2 land commissions in town at the same time. And so there may be some caveats. There may be something that would be nice before you did vote on a blanket and then have to revisit it. So
I think some of that's dictated by the town bylaw too. Whether or not you can serve on certain things.
Yeah.
So you're still governed there.
And you still have the bylaws that govern that. It's just, if you're saying all or none, it just seems to make more sense just to make it all and be done with it.
I mean, I certainly think it's worth talking to town council about. I wasn't, she just asked me to come and explain to you what my knowledge of it was. I mean, I think you should, I definitely think you may want to consult with town council on what their opinion is.
Mr. Butcher?
Bob Fletcher, Gun Road. I don't know why you would want to limit yourself, why you would want to shut people out if you're looking for people to sit on these committees and help you out. I think you should open the door up and address each one as it comes down the line. If you have to step out of a meeting, then so be it. I don't think it's a difficult process to excuse yourself from the meeting.
I'm not opposed to doing a blanket like that, but we're doing, at least I'm gonna do a blanket vote on, I don't know who. I mean, it seems like if we put all the commissions and committees and all that on a piece of paper, then we look at it and say, okay, now we know who we're voting for, and before we vote, whoever said that, send it to the attorney saying, here's the ones we think we're gonna do. Anything look wrong? Because now we're voting on, four of us stand up here and say, name all the committees that you're voting to do this with. Nobody's gonna have a clue. We'll name the big ones and that's it, but there's another dozen buried under there that I feel a little uncomfortable with saying, go ahead, I don't know them.
So you're saying you prefer to see a list before we have a.
Yeah, let's see who we're voting for, I mean.
But I guess, John, the only other thing was going back to all or none. Again, I would just, if ethics is telling, and I trust what Amanda's saying, is that
Yeah.
if ethics is saying it should be all or none, then who are we to say it shouldn't be? I mean,
We're the town that is gonna take responsibility for saying, oh, I just wanna know who all is, you know?
You may want to call the ethics commission yourself too. I mean, that's what they're there for. They're free. You call them, they'll tell you anything you want to know, as far as it goes. I mean, that's the whole point of it.
Only if you have a personal conflict that you're calling about.
You just
They
can't
won't
call.
talk to me, because that's not my personal conflict.
Right, they won't do that.
That's why you were perfect,
That's,
Amanda.
well,
You've
they
called
called
millions
you
of
back.
times.
I had a lot of conversations with them, but, so,
The only concern I would say, based on what John was mentioning, is that if you start getting back into the list of, this is the list that's included, this is the list that isn't. Thing to keep in mind is, remember, we're going down the road, 4 years from now, we add a new commission or committee called Amanda's Committee. Amanda's Committee is not added to the list because we didn't think to add it to the list. Whereas opposed to if you say all committees, commissions, are designated special municipal employees, you cover all of them. Whether it's here, whether it's going forward, everything's covered. And when my initial comment was to say, subject to any objection by town council, so that covers any problem that town council has with the motion. So if town council says that's great, but you can't include, so then, at that point, it says, all committees and commissions are considered special municipal employees except for the finance committee, for Amanda. So, but that's just my thought.
I think we should review this list annually, maybe. You said you don't remember the last time this list was ever done, and there's committees on there that maybe aren't around anymore.
Well, the list
I
isn't
think there
as
was
annual.
10 things, I think there were 10 boards or committees on that list, and that was it. It was a really short list compared to what we have in town.
So
Well, if it's all, then it's all. And, if you want a list of everybody that's in town, you just look in the annual town.
So there's a motion, I don't think there's a second, but I guess my only thought is it's all or nothing. However, if we pass that motion and move on, can we get a list to see what we're talking about here? And then at that point, take some off and go forward from there. I mean, if you say all, then you can take things off the list, right? If they don't exist anymore, then they don't need to be on that list. If they're added, then you can add them to that list. But I don't know that we need to hold up the process to check the list.
Excuse me for saying it this way, but it sounds like you're saying, go ahead and vote on all or nothing, then we'll check it afterwards and see if that's what we really
Well,
want.
you can take the ones off the list that don't exist anymore, or you leave the door open to add Amanda's, probably a really bad example, but to add Amanda's committee later. Yes.
All set with having a new committee.
I'm not sure if this is time sensitive, but I would think that if you were taking a vote, you would be voting at a snapshot of what was currently in place. And then you would make modifications or revisions later on. But to do it with an old list, you should really look at the list, and then take a vote as to what action you would want to take.
Well, Nilda,
That would be the more,
but Nilda, it's all or none is what I keep going back to, so.
but Liz said all or, so there are 10. So it's all or none, and then she adds 2 more.
I'm saying
So
it's,
are you
no,
saying-
I'm saying it's
Heather-
all the boards and commissions that are currently in, I'm not saying let's look at this list and say those 10, I'm saying all boards and commissions that are in
Existing.
But I think,
existence.
but Heather also made a point that if there was a commission in the future, it should be covered for that as well.
Right.
Because you're saying all commissions and boards. So that if there was an Amanda commission next year, it would still be fitted, it would just make the whole process easier, because then somebody coming on a board or commission would know they're all special towns, and this is what your special municipal employees, and this is what you have to do. And it sort of just makes it easier.
And who would have responsibility for, let's say, looking at this list annually? Is that the town clerk?
You don't have to look at the list, because it's all.
The town.
There
clerk-
should be a list though, I mean, it would make sense if there's a list somewhere.
So
And
it's,
especially
it's the town clerk
employees-
who's supposed to maintain the list. They're the ones you're supposed to be able to get it from because it's a vote by the select board. So the town clerk should have the list, and they would be the ones responsible to be the keeper of the list.
So once we say all, if that were to pass, then the town clerk needs to make sure there's a list of every board and every commission that's current.
Okay, so whatever the standing boards and committee and so forth at the time would be part of
But also moving
the
forward,
list.
but also moving forward, you could add another commission, Amanda's
Right, right,
commission,
right.
and it would still hold this vote.
Automatically be on.
Right, and then the people will understand this is the process you need to go through, and it's standardized. Well, how come he doesn't have to do it? Because he's on that special board. Whereas everybody on every single board in town or commission would have to do the same thing every time, and have to understand the process the same way every time. Instead of like, wait a minute, like my wife's on library trustees, wait a minute, am I a special town? Do I have to? It just makes it easier.
Okay. Now, getting back to, I recall when Randall and Amanda came before the board, and she got a special employee status, if that's the correct word, because she did business with the town, and she wanted to be able to still have that economic benefit, but have the protection of the special employee. So are we treating everyone as a special employee for, to give them a release of being able to gain some financial gain if they go into some?
So essentially what I learned after I had come and spoke was you can't just hand it to an individual. So technically I'm not a special town employee because I can't be. You have to do the whole board. So if the finance committee, which they're currently not, is not a special town employee, then they're not. So, but what it does is, and that was part of how this came into play was, you know, I basically was a write-in for the finance committee because I have a background in finance, I have a business degree, and so this was how I felt I wanted to give back to the town and serve the town. And it was after the fact, after I'd already been working on projects, that I learned that there was this conflict of interest with, even though I never went in front of finance, going in front of the planning board. So that was how all my conversations came into play. So if they don't vote to make, if they don't add the finance committee to this list, I can't appear in front of any boards in town. You know, that's, and if I do it, I have to file a disclosure with the town clerk if they make the finance committee a special town employee. And I have to say, here's where I'm going, here's what I'm doing, and here's how much I'm making off of that deal. Because it's potentially a conflict of interest. And when I spoke to the Ethics Commission, as they said to me, did you technically violate it? Yes, but there wasn't really, they said, but you didn't appear in front of your own board. You were in front of the planning board, which has nothing to do with the finance committee. So it's not about making individuals and giving them leeway as much as it is all the boards. It has to be the entire board. It can't just be an individual. And still, as I said, you have to file something with whoever your governing board is. Whether it's an appointment by the select board, you come in front of them. If you're elected, it's the town clerk.
So when you went before the board at that time, and you presented the information that you had gathered from them, you know.
At that time, I didn't understand that it had to be the entire board, and I had a conversation subsequent to that,
Okay.
where I learned that that was the case.
one,
Right.
the benefit of all of us being special employees is the financial part was what I was getting at, just like Randall being on conservation in terms of not being able to vote or partake in conversations that would be a conflict of interest. Or, I don't know if he's a special employee, but anyway.
Conservation is,
Okay.
and he filed all his necessary disclosures with them.
All right, well, that clarifies that.
It just makes it easier
Yeah, yeah,
for everybody,
yeah.
so.
That
That's
makes
just,
a big difference,
yeah.
big difference.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is, well, first of all, I'm supposed to point out that it's usually all or none. It's not necessarily a rule, but that's generally how, Randall asked me to point that out.
Right.
He's apparently watching at home. Other than that
Yeah,
point,
usually we,
Yes.
normal.
it is.
Normally, usually, in a town our size.
And
it is
other than
usually
that, my
normal.
other comment was simply gonna be, when you, generally speaking, when you have everyone who's in the same group, so everyone's a special municipal employee, everyone's aware of the conflict of interest policy at that point, because it applies to you. It's not, do I have to file a conflict of interest form? Who do I file with? At that point, it's common procedure, so Amanda's gonna do something, she's filing a conflict of interest form. Nova's gonna do something, she's filing a conflict of interest form. And it actually discloses more information than you would have gotten in the first place. It's more transparent, shall we say.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
And can I just make one statement?
Or did you
one
make
more
the
thing on
second
motion?
for discussion?
Because David just followed my words.
What's that?
I just wanted to add, when I had originally said that, to which David just said move as such, we should also add boards. I think I just said commissions and committees, but it should be all of the groups that we have. So it should include boards, committees, commissions. Is there any other designation I'm missing? No. Boards, commissions, and committees.
John, it just makes sense, it makes it easier, and then,
Oh, I don't disagree, I just think we're doing it reverse. So could you repeat the motion, just?
So what I had said was to designate all boards, commissions, committees as special municipal employees, subject to any objection by town council. And David had said,
We're not gonna review this forever, so any new board that comes on,
would automatically be special, and they would have to follow the same, what I'm trying to standardize what people have to do when they serve.
I hear, I think it opens up some issues down the road that we won't be able to look at. I mean, if we had to review it once a year as part of the motion, I think I could live with that.
Now, just a matter of order, is the motion being made by Heather?
no, I had made a comment, and
She talks faster than I.
Okay.
I had made a comment, and David had said motion as such. So since he didn't have the verbiage of the motion.
Just a lot more on the agenda tonight, just was,
Process.
possible.
Did we want to amend the motion to add in the review annually or not?
I mean, it's the board's pleasure, I feel that there is a need to get more people involved in town, and historically, I'm just gonna say historically, that what I've seen sitting here in the politics of town, it seems like the Ethics Commission is on speed dial. And I've seen the Ethics Commission used as a political weapon in town at times. If someone doesn't like somebody, they get on the phone and call. I mean, I've seen that. And to unmuddy the waters by standardizing and clearly this is what you're going to do, helps maybe take away some of the angst of being on a commission and wondering if you're going to make a false step.
I don't disagree with that. I deal with the Ethics Commission all the time myself. I'm just concerned that it could just go forever and we forget about it. That's why if you added the annual in there, I could be persuaded. Annual review.
Is that standard to have an annual review?
I think what John's saying, if I'm understanding him correctly, is simply to review the idea of having all employees designated as special municipal employees once annually to make sure it's the right path to continue.
Yeah, make sure there's no issues that have gone on the past year that we want to correct.
When would you like to sort of ballpark put that on the agenda? Like what time of year? Is that after reorganization? Or, I mean, so if you really want to think about it, is it something that we should think about? Should be.
That would be a good time, because then you might have new people on the board who will need to be reminded about what this means.
So maybe when you're organizing the board, one of the topics should be that special, municipal town employees and how's it applied to, is that something that
It's
would?
fine, within the month following, anything like that is fine.
All right, so I amend my motion is
And what is that? What's your amendment, David?
to have a yearly review of of what it means. It's basically gonna mean everybody.
Of the decision, yeah.
Right, it's basically, John, it's everybody.
Yeah,
And
okay.
then is there anybody who want to exclude, basically?
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Amanda. All right. I'm gonna skip the approval of minutes. See? George, do you want me to move to something?
George, did you have a?
Are you on here? Wait a minute, I didn't call for open time for the public. No, would you like me to? Open time for the public.
This is nearly a time. We're talking about merging part of the dispatch with Holyoke, which will probably save us some money. And regionalizing this and that. And I probably guess with Liz, and I'll throw this at the board. I think we gotta merge a couple departments, the water department and the town department.
The what?
And
Water.
the water department and the town.
Highway?
The highway department.
George, we tried to do that, we got shot down, man.
When did we try to do that?
Dude,
Public Works.
2005, man, it was,
Again, now.
we did it again, George, and we got shot down again with the town clerk and the tax collector. That was part of
I'm talking
the,
about just merging.
we were gonna do a DPW, but people got up, George, and said, you're taking away our vote because they wouldn't be able to vote for the
Wait a
water.
minute now. We're not, I'm talking about the water department and the highway department.
The water commissioners are in that equation.
There's $100,000 we're paying one, and I don't know what we pay the other, but somewhere there could be some savings.
Oh, there's big savings. I mean,
There is.
if you made it a DPW, it's a big savings. Ed Colley, the former highway supervisor, was running the highway department as a DPW.
Okay, Department of Public Works and the water.
And it all came under one umbrella.
Well, let's put it back.
George, sure. I mean, we can put it on the annual for this coming up this year. But it was, if you look at the DO report in 2004, 2007.
Well, that's 2005.
But no, but that was that recommendation to do that, George.
Now we're in a hole, by whatever we're in a hole. This would help. We could probably save 70, 80,000, maybe I'm wrong.
But I'm just saying the argument on the town floor at the annual was, you're taking away my right to vote for the water commissioners. It was conspiracy by the Board of Selectmen. We're taking away your right. And that's how it was played out. So you instilled just a little bit of doubt, George, and it got shot down. That's a conspiracy.
Well, now we're talking about,
Reason to revisit.
it needs to be revisited.
I agree, it's a logical thing to do, George.
Point taken.
Wouldn't you also have to give some consideration to the fact that the water department is an enterprise fund, so that status would then change as
But
well?
it was also, we had it all worked out. We can look at the motion from, I don't know which year it was, 05, 6, 7, in that range. You look at the town warrant, the articles in the town warrant, and you can see where it was sort of worked out.
I'm sure that those can all that conversation can happen. George's point is well taken.
That's all I got to say. Just one other thing. I was asking about how much money is generated by the people who are doing the inspection.
I can find out for
Well,
you.
no. My point was, I never got to it, was did they make enough money to cover their own salaries? And I suspect they did. Electrical inspector, the plumbing inspector, did they make enough money, right? And the next thing I wanted to say, once we find out how much money, let's say, the plumbing inspector made, and we go regional, will we make the same money? Because maybe the plumbing inspector is local or whatever. Richmond is local.
I thought we were gonna get the fees, right? Don't we still get the
We
fees?
still get all.
We still get the fees.
Oh, yes, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, will we generate the same amount of money under regional?
I see what you're saying.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Nelda?
I'll do open time too. I'd like to address, and piggyback on what he said, on July 1st, when the board met, they took a vote to hire Quinlan. On July 15th, you came in with him here with the intent of negotiating the contract, appointing, whatever it was. And then John, you brought to the table the issue of, this is an opportunity to look at the financial impact. Well, I don't have a criticism of that. What I do have a criticism is that Richard left, gave notifications months prior to his actual departure date, in that while you weren't on the board that long, and the financial situation was not known because of the override, it was, as a taxpayer, as a board member, active community person, I was embarrassed to have that presented after the fact, because we don't know whether that, he gave notice, he talked to other people, you gave glowing recommendations based, everyone was so on that page, this is the candidate. Today, you made a statement that you didn't have that much experience, you knew where you found. The fact is, the job description did not require a person to be a resident.
Correct.
So I question, how did it come about that Holyoke got involved to the extent of writing up a proposal, because the board did not have, as a governing body, did not have a discussion in open forum about that position, about what the next course of action was.
I mean, I guess one comment is the proposal came in after the end of the process when we were doing the interviews. Heather can tell you how it came in. I guess they saw the ad in the paper, were proactive sending us something. And as far as Mr. Quinlan not being local, I was addressing Mr. Boyle's question, saying that if we hire him, we'll have somebody local again. And I just wanted to point out, we wouldn't have anybody local because this gentleman's coming from Hadley, and he only had 2 months of experience. He was what we felt at the time was our best option for going forward. Was it a great option? No, because the depth of experience was very shallow. But what could we do to, with the candidates we had? And when we saw this come out, it was an opportunity in my mind to say, okay, let's slow down the process. Let's look at this opportunity because the voters have clearly said, we want you to save money.
And I'm not criticizing.
Oh, no, I'm not taking it that way.
I find troubling because we are in a financial crisis. We are trying to plug up so many little holes which could drown us, that the cohesiveness of a plan, of a discussion, of some, at least from the select board, to have everyone be on the same page. Ed probably hadn't even looked at it or had received it. So I got the impression that if one member didn't see it or the chair had not presented it as something that she had looked into and wanted the full board to discuss, but that wasn't the case because, it was evident that people on this board felt uncomfortable with this gentleman sitting there thinking he was going to have a job and then leaving with a delayed decision as to what. So I gather for tonight, the job is still up in the air, right? You're going to look into further discussion with the city council?
The email and correct me if I'm wrong, the email from Holyoke their interest came after our meeting with him?
It was after the July 1st meeting.
After the July 1st.
What happened was John had seen the advertisements. I'm sure he also heard about it. He has family who lives in town here, so they watched the Board of Selectmen meetings. And he had come to that information that, we were looking and the like. And at that point, we received an email, and it actually went to the selectman email. When you send something to the selectman, it goes to each of the individual board members as well as myself. At the time, I didn't realize it went to all of the board members. I just saw it. I contacted him right away. I told them, we had already moved forward with the position. But that's when we started talking about other things. But at that point, everyone had the information, and they decided, as a board, when we came to the meeting, that they'd like to pursue that further.
And it made Mr. Quinlan uncomfortable, and I apologize for that, but I don't think my charge is to make somebody comfortable if there's an opportunity to save money for the town. I think it's apologize and look at how we can save money for the town. It's if we're going to be nice about all of this stuff as we go forward, we're going to be in the same place next year. And I'm going to go back to time after time. The vote said pretty clearly, 2-1, you better get your act together and figure out how to save money and run the town efficiently. That's going to be in the back of my mind in everything I look at. And whether we're uncomfortable with looking at regional anything, well, okay, let's be uncomfortable. Let's throw it up there and look at it and say, this great idea, go forward, or it's a poor idea, put it behind us. But we've too many times in the past said, well, we don't want to touch this department, we don't want to touch that department. Dave over there was saying, well, in 2005 we did this, but I'm going to agree with whoever brought it up. That was 2005. That was a whole different climate. Let's look at it again. It may have the same result, but we may say this is a great idea now. I mean, how many old ideas have we put aside and come up with 5-6 years later? I don't think we need to tiptoe on anybody's,
Well, I wouldn't
pride.
use the word necessarily nice. I would say a professional environment. And if that was known in the pipeline, I'm sure that the chair could have called Heather, said, listen, let's tell him to hold up, something's come up, not have him present. And actually, you need to rescind the vote because you took a vote to make him an offer, and that hasn't taken place since July 15th. And so, and I don't know what that's going to do with, this discussion with the city council, but I also think that in terms of the town vote, the annual budget, they voted to fund that department. How does that impact in terms of that vote? Do you have to go to another special town meeting to?
Usually the line just stays there, and there'll be end of year transfers. So say, we'll have to, I'm not exactly sure, Nilda. We may have to go special town meeting if there's a municipal agreement and look at other things of that. But like when Reggie's position,
would be different.
but when Reggie's position wasn't filled, there was still a line there, and there was money in that. Now, when Diane Schindler left, there was still money in there, and we took some of that money out and transferred some of that money. So sometimes the money gets moved around a little bit. As for how this will play out with Holyoke, who knows? Who knows how it's going to play out? But we do have a need. We need to get an inspector in town. There are people building homes in town. There are plumbers and electricians and carpenters and whatever doing work, trying to make a living, and we owe it to them to have the inspectors on site at a timely response for their needs, so they get paid, so they can pay their mortgages and feed their families. So we need to move forward on this, and that's why I was kind of pushing it a little bit, because there is a need. We don't have anything right now. We got to get something.
And I can't speak to that. That's not my expertise, and I rely on the people that have the experience. But I just really felt that on top of everything else, we need to really cross our T's and dot our I's and come across as being professional, and that we need to avoid those kinds of situations rather, because it just doesn't look good. So that was my take on that.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Okay. So we're going to move on to the Conservation Commission license agreement renewal between the town and Mr. Robert Fletcher regarding 22 Gun Road. This is continued from July 15th. Mr. Fletcher is here, Conservation Commission is here, and this matter is continued from the last meeting where the Board of Selectmen requested that, hold on. We had a few questions about the contract, the renewal.
I can answer a lot of your questions.
That would be really helpful, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you.
The property in question is on Glendale Road, not on Gun Road.
Okay.
There was a discussion about the amount of land. The total land
over there is 157 acres. We only farm about 20 of it. We had recently had a site visit with the Conservation Commission of things that need to be done over there. There is some hay land over there that we do cut, but we do not take hay off of it. We clean it off for public access. We do not charge the town for it. As we refer to it to the Conservation Commission, it is our give back to the town. It is our time, our labor, our fuel, our machines. We do not build the town. I do take a little bit of offense that board members look at me as I'm over there baling hay and selling it as fast as I can at $4 and $5 and $6 a bale, which I am not doing. Any feed that I take off there, I use all for my own animals, period. We do field maintenance. We do not charge the town for that. As I said to the Conservation Commission site visit, there is a tremendous amount of maintenance to do on that property. It is overwhelming, to say the least.
But isn't the highway do some of the swales and stuff though?
No.
Okay.
All of the drainage ditches throughout that property, and we have had this discussion on many occasions, there is probably in the neighborhood of $5,000 worth of maintenance to do just on those ditches. As we stated to the commission site visit, this is part of our give back. If we can and are allowed to hire a private contractor to start working on these ditches, it is part of a 5-year plan. It is our cost. We assume it as using pure land. It is our give back. I kind of look at it as it's a win-win for both of us. I don't like being looked at as it's a one-sided deal that favors me, that favors me having a great windfall over here. There was, I can tell you probably the back 3/4 of that property is underwater. The hunters that use that in the fall for that purpose, they cannot use it any longer.
What's that?
You can't access it. You can't walk on it from the driveway.
It's wet.
Yes.
Okay.
We would like to open up more access for the public. During our site visit, we have a place over in the back that we feel that we can cross down into the lower land with a little bit of maintenance, that we would keep this avenue open to the public. It would be our maintenance of it at no cost to the town, because we'll be in there working anyways. It will allow, what we're trying to do is allow the public to do a complete loop of the property, so they can come in, go around, walk their dogs, jog, whatever they intend to do back there.
So you can just go walk back there?
You sure can.
May I say a few things?
Absolutely.
That's a piece of property that was purchased by funding from the state, a land grant. Its sole purpose is protection of the water supply and passive recreation and open space. It has a lot of features that are very attractive from an environmental point of view. A very important point is that we're working with a license on this property, which restricts very significantly what Bob can do. It isn't a lease, and there's quite a distinction there, and this license was developed by Copeland and Page about 5 years ago. And as far as the amount of money is concerned, we had done research. We have done research on how much we could get for that property. By going to places, there's a state agency, as well as the University of Massachusetts Extension Service. And we came up with a relatively modest amount of money based on the fact that the services that Bob provides for the residents, the passive recreation, the flying of kites and taking hikes and so on, are very much value to the Conservation Commission. So we were happy, and the Commission and the Water Commission also was happy to extend this for 3 years. The important thing to note, the 5-year plan that Bob is suggesting is something, all the details of that have to be worked out and approved by both the Conservation Commission and the Water Commission and the Select Board. And there may be some additional revenues generated in that process. But at this point, we are just extending Bob's service of the property for, again, passive recreation and water protection.
At the last meeting, this is the first time that I've seen this renewal, and so it was said that this conversation comes up very often. Do you think that that's because there's new people on the board and we don't know, or is there something we can do to change that conversation?
I think that there has been, in the past, I guess it's kind of an aggressive, it's always been from certain boards, seems to be an aggressive response towards us. That we're doing something that we're not supposed to be doing, we're making a great gain on the town that we're not. And when you see the amount of land that is getting away from us, it becomes to the point where you say, you know what, I don't even know if this is worth it for me anymore. And we're trying to stop that at this point. I guess you already have 2 commissions overlooking this property. I've never done anything, when I see something in there, or I think that we're at a point where we need to have a meeting, we have a meeting, and it's never been any different in all the years we've been in there. I don't think that we've ever overstepped our boundaries in there. We've always done, respected the town's wishes in there to the letter. And, I would think the board should feel comfortable that you've got 2 other commissions looking after it. It comes in front of the selectmen, and the selectmen say, well, we're not really up to speed on this. My feeling is, have a quick meeting with these 2 commissions and say, what's going on over there?
So this is the land on, is it up behind like Golden Circle, that portion of the land? On that
It
far side?
abuts Golden Circle.
So that's that,
On the far side.
and there's, from my understanding, there's an easement from Golden Circle to get into that property?
Water easement, yes.
So that there could be passive recreation into that area? And basically what you're saying is you wanna, and obviously fields will start to grow in, so what you're trying to do is maintain the field as open space and clean up maybe some of the drainage issues there. And the water commission's okay with you in there?
We have always, and we had a site visit with the water commission 5 years ago.
Okay.
There's
Is
a
it
very
proximity to the town well and?
the well, I guess we consider the well pretty much the center point of the property. That nothing supersedes the well. The well is the most important thing. There has to be an understanding of the 400-foot zone line, and we are aware of that.
Bob, I'm only saying that so these guys know what we're talking about. I have a kind of an idea of what we're talking about. Talking about education now. Is this area on the conservation map?
Yes, yes. And, yeah, at one point, Bob is highly restricted in terms of the type of fertilizer he can put on that property.
Correct.
That is related to the water protection.
And who oversees them? Who oversees what the farmer is actually putting in? Who's actually the person that's going to say, wait a minute, that's the wrong fertilizer?
Well, we don't monitor it that close. We have to work on a certain level of
You know what I'm
trust.
saying? I'm trying to make sure the nitrates.
What I have done, the last time we did this, we had some new products that I introduced. All of them were shot down. I can tell you.
Who shot them down? Who oversaw that, though?
Ed.
Okay, so he's on the water commission.
He was on the water commission.
So the water commissioners are involved in this as
Yes.
a conversation. Are you on the water commissioners? Okay, so you don't say much, but you're here. So, and you're up to speed, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate?
Right, basically, I think it's pretty much limited as to what you can put down. It's
Okay.
close to nothing.
That's what I thought. That's why I'm going to decide to talk about fertilizers. My experience sitting here watching the conversation, nothing really should be going out there. By the way, we won the best tasting water in New England, no, in the country in 2005 from that, right? Slattery went down to DC and won that. So we really want to preserve that, so we don't want to put stuff out there. But I just want to...
And basically what we're what we are doing, I mean, we are allowed to use lime over there, which is perfectly acceptable substance. We use an organic, it's called an organic wood ash. It's high in potash, which is also acceptable.
So this is just for haying purposes, you're just using this for haying?
Right now, it's,
One of the other things, reasons that it didn't get signed was that we wanted to revisit the conversation of the dollar amount per,
Yeah, can I-
yes, go ahead, John.
and I don't know Mr. Fletcher personally, but somebody had brought to my attention, and I helped negotiate the lease of their license at UMass versus the lease, so I knew about that. But somebody came to me and said, well, we've got 150 acres, he's haying it, what's hay cost now, and he's paying
and
150.
nobody ever says anything about the cost of producing the hay.
Well, what I think would have been nice, and I don't know if it's us, because there were a couple new people, conservation, or yourself, when this comes up, have somebody in the audience like yourself, because the way you explained it to me, you're maintaining the land, and you're taking the hay for your own use, and you're grazing, and you're improving it. That's a whole different picture than, gee, this gentleman over here is taking advantage of the town, and we need money. So the backstory, if you will, gives a whole different picture, and it's great that you're here, so I appreciate it from my point of view. It makes a lot more sense.
When you don't know anything and you read it,
And
you
somebody
think,
comes to you.
how can we benefit?
And
So,
unfortunately, I didn't have access to a vehicle quick enough last week, or 2 weeks ago, to get down here when the conversation was going on.
That John Deere would have came right down.
Yeah, I'm sure it would.
But so water commission is okay
yes.
with, all they care about is protection of the well.
Right, and
You know,
that's our priority, and we kind of run Bob through the ringer a couple of years ago on this.
He's been through the ringer a number of times over this, yes.
So the current commission is comfortable with the way the agreement is. I think we looked at it at our last meeting, we didn't sign it, we wanted to have this open discussion, which
It is
the two commissioners couldn't make it tonight evidently.
and Mr. Fletcher knows that to approach you, it's pretty much that you're talking to the water commissioners all the time, Bob, and they know what you're up to, if you're gonna change your product or anything.
I haven't, I mean, what I do is I try to keep up on changes. There is a huge movement in using, like this wood ash it's a leftover byproduct, that has a beneficial use, and it doesn't have anything that should be of concern as far as.
Well, it depends what the wood ash is, I mean, if they're burning pressure treated material.
It's wood ash, it's exactly what it is.
But it's not construction material that's being.
No, it's wood chips burned in a wood fire energy plant, and it comes highly recommended. It's got analysis with it. I get analysis with every load that I bring in. It's a huge savings of not having to use commercial fertilizer. We do use common manure over there. We do very regimented spreading over there, so we've talked about this, about watching the weather, so we're not getting leaching into the waterways and heavy rains. We're trying to cover all the bases in a very responsible, like the license says, a respectful way that, doesn't jeopardize what the town has in there.
And any modifications that he anticipates, he reviews with the Conservation Commission and the Water Commission, and we can review it with you.
So you need a motion to sign the license?
We do. But Mr. Floyd, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just 2 cents worth. I came prepared to present a lot of information on the history from 2008 before through the 90s, based on your use of the word lease. And the Conservation Commission needs a town meeting to lease land, but hearing the different verbiage is good. Mr. Fletcher originally signed an agreement with the town 1997, that's 17 years. I've observed him to be an excellent steward of the land. We hashed a lot of things out. We brought in the Water Commission. We had the Select Board present. He saved a lot of the acreage that was wet, and you can't, farmers need a permit to dig a ditch, so everyone got involved. He was able to have that land ditched, and it did drain those acres, so that's what I was prepared to present. And it was tied in at the time to the nesting of the bobolink. That would be the end of June, or the bobwhite, sorry, that would be the end of June, so that was what the original agreement was, 48 was 400. And one thing, this has been debated a lot through the select board through the years, Conservation Commission has a responsibility to maintain those fields, those meadows, as meadows. So if it wasn't for someone such as Mr. Fletcher, the Conservation Commission would need to hire someone to mow those fields to maintain it. So the concept that you've been around for 17 years, you probably will outlast all of us here in
A couple
this
of
town
goats would
hall.
do that. When you get like 20 goats out there, they'll eat anything, right, Bob? They'll eat anything.
They will eat anything.
They'll eat all the brush all the way back to the
If you
wire.
take the time to keep an eye on them, God bless you.
Just stick them out there.
So before I accept a motion, I just want to say thank you for coming in and explaining it, and hopefully the point is taken that sometimes a little more explanation is needed, especially when the boards turn over. We don't get all the memos, the communication is not always there, and there are a gazillion things to communicate. So I thank you for coming in and making things a little more clearly, and hopefully others will follow suit.
Yeah, wait till the
Now-
tie down comes up
Can I
again.
ask a question before you do it?
Sure.
My first notice that this was public land for passive use, is that advertised anywhere? Can we?
It's on the map.
Right at the front gate.
It's on his map.
Right on cue. We are in the process.
Well, that's good, because I don't know, and I'm always looking for free, safe places to go walk.
Is there a sign or something?
Yes,
There is, right at the
there's
front gate.
parking.
I think
And
we should
this is
promote this
the
more.
problem that you're addressing, I think, and Liz mentioned it first. The Conservation Commission has over 600 acres, divided into 23 parcels, only 4 of which are really set up for decent hiking. And they are in various states of good repair because we have winter blowdowns. And it's only the commission that is, at this point, responsible. We really need some help from the citizens of the town. The Boy Scouts have been helpful in the past. The 4 that are very reasonably well positioned are Wolf Hill, the Zipter Farm, the Whittemore at the end of Meadow Lane, and Manhan Meadows, which is sort of like in the poorest shape. But we are developing hiking maps for these. We got money from the last warrant. PVPC has given us a lot of help, and they will be on our website. So we are addressing, trying to communicate. But these are wonderful properties to go hiking on. And to the extent you're not aware of it, it's a disservice to the community.
Well, I would like to formally say thank you for letting us borrow your wagon, your hay wagon, at Memorial Day Parade. Everybody had a great time. It was wonderful. And I apologize for not saying thank you that day. But next year, if you're kind enough, I will definitely make that effort. And also thank you for taking care of the land all these years.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Since you're talking about bringing up old things, would this board give any consideration to discussing the give back of the tire land to the farm?
I think we've had this discussion in the past, and it pauses, I don't know the bloody details, but I know that it's under a trust and it's set aside, and I think there's a court, the court's involved. But again, Bob, I'm just talking on top of my head, because it's come up several times, and you've brought this up in the past. I think it would be in the best interest to have that discussion with the appropriate documents in front of us, especially for the new members. Just being, because they don't understand the history and whatnot.
I do think that enough time has passed. The land was originally part of the farm. The project has been done, signed off on. The problems that occurred down there are occurring again.
Well, the problems that were going down there was 400,000 tires?
No.
The tires are still there.
They're gone.
No, the tires are still there. I've walked the property. The tires were left in place to prevent erosion. There are still tires there, Robert. You know that. There are still tires.
If you want to come over, we'll take a walk and
I will say that if this is something that we would like to have a conversation about, I think we need to have it put on the agenda, and if,
I think it needs to be discussed.
I think that that's
There
okay.
are problems down there that I would like to, before they get any worse than they already are.
No, Bob, we've had these conversations before, but I think for fairness for everybody else, we just need to have the documents.
Because I don't
and
have a
understanding
clue
the legal opinion
at
on
all.
what's going
So
on.
I can't have a conversation about something I don't know or that is not on the agenda. So if you get in touch with Heather and have it put on, then in all fairness, we can talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we need a little time in between, then we get the documents to review them too, rather
I
than
concur.
just that week, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Now we
We have
have,
to have the signed license, though.
That's because we don't currently physically possess it. I believe one of Matt's counterparts may currently hold it. So as soon as we receive it, the board, I'm sure, can make it to venture.
we have 2 PCFs for the animal inspector, an emergency PCF and a temporary PCF for KRPs. This is continued from July 15th. We wanted to make sure that it went to the PQB and the Finance Committee before the Select Board signed them. Everything's signed off on, everything's filled out, and she's already
Make the motion to approve to sign?
It's an animal inspector position, so I don't think we've needed her since, to my knowledge, or we might have needed her, I don't recall.
So I need a motion to sign.
I just did.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. What is the date today?
Today's 29.
Really? That's so sad.
We can't lie, we're on TV.
Only because school starts in a month.
That's right, you got the whole summer off.
Isn't that so sad? 1 month left.
Thank you.
We have a payroll warrant. Did you get a chance to look at
I
it?
did.
Okay. And let me just make sure.
You're gonna need to wait for Jackie to come
Okay,
back,
so
because that's
let's
one of those
move
that
We have, oh God, this is a long agenda. We have a PCF for paramedic firefighter reappointment of Paul Richard. The PPB met on this PCF and after meeting with the fire chief have not recommended the PCF.
I would just like to clarify, it's actually Richard Paul. The
Oh.
problem I have is 2 first names. I apologize if you're listening.
I was
at
like,
home.
I was confused.
Mr. Paul actually was supposed to be here this evening. He's unable to come because of work. He did send me an email at 6:30. I'd like to just read into the record on his behalf. Let's see if I can see this. I regrettably am stuck at work and cannot attend the meeting tonight. I respectfully request that you table the vote of my employment. Having the town's full support on this matter is important to me, and I wish to revisit the matter with the PQB before we continue. Thank you.
So you'd like me to pass over this?
Well, I wanted to say one thing, though. I was, Heather informed me of what the concern was, and I'm not going to mention what the concern was, only because it's hearsay and it affects someone's character. But my important thing is the PQB is not here to make management decisions. They're here to, is there funding for the position? Or excuse me, that's finance. How is the position scored? Does it meet the scoring? And, all the other job stuff that goes with it. It's a technical thing. It's not a management thing. And from what I understand in talking to the town administrator, the PQB's concerned was a management thing, which I think may set a precedent you don't want to go down, where they may not like somebody that the police chief wants to hire for whatever reason, and they don't sign off on it, versus doing what they're supposed to do for all the technical stuff.
Paperwork filled
Just the
out.
paperwork for the job. So that's my concern, and I think that's a bad precedent.
My question is, I know very little except that they opposed it, or so I heard, because this person got terminated in the past.
Again,
Well, the person got terminated or not, that's a fact.
but that's a management decision.
Whose job is it then to make that choice?
I wanna
That's my
know
question.
before I
Whose
vote.
job is it then to make the choice?
Well, first of all, it's the fire chief's or the department head's role to hire somebody.
Right, I
They may
agree.
have a specific skill or something, or there was remediation or other things occurred.
Yeah.
But for a technical board to make a management decision sets the wrong
I
precedent.
agree 100%,
How do
personnel
you
shouldn't be
move-
involved, but when it gets to us, we have to vote on it, right?
I think we need to talk to PQB and understand, so they understand what the expectations are. I wouldn't, that could really gum up a lot of things, and then you're micromanaging everything in the town through one
I
department.
don't disagree with the conversation, but I'm still wondering, whose job is it to say, these are the facts of the situation, and you agree or don't agree. Who gets to make it, just the fire chief? Because that one position for that one reason affects the whole town. So who gets to make that choice? One person?
Either you trust your managers or you don't.
Well, the issue I have is there a liability to the town?
Right.
And if there's a liability or possible liability, it's up to us.
I'll tell you what, you guys do what you want to do. I don't want to start micromanaging who the highway department wants to hire. What if there's somebody they hired that had a DWI, okay? Lost his license for 6 months.
Yeah.
Got it all back.
Yeah.
And they want to hire him. But someone on PQB said, wait a minute, he had a DWI.
I don't think it's PQB's job to do it. I think we agree with that. But if
But I would
information...
trust Randall's decision, the highway super's decision. If they're gonna hire somebody, that person's working in the best interest of the town. It's not an outside entity. It's Chief Workman's is working for the best interest of the town. And if he feels in the best interest of the town is to hire this person, either you trust Chief Workman or you don't.
So here's my next question then. As a liaison to the PQB and present in all of these conversations, if I 100% disagree with what's happening, but technically it's correct, do I vote yes there and I vote no here? Or do I keep myself consistent throughout and do what I think is the right thing?
What's your job on the PQB? That's what you gotta ask yourself.
Well, isn't it to be a liaison to the Board of Selectmen and relay that information and communicate the information to you all? But I can't, I don't know, I have a very hard time saying yes one place and no somewhere else. That doesn't
But I think
seem right to me.
the yes is.
Yes, it's technical, but no, I don't agree?
But, yeah, you'll get your chance at another point, but you're giving a decision point to a body that doesn't have that decision capability. They're the technical, it's this. Check, check, check. You now get to sit here. If you were on the PQB and you weren't sitting here but felt concerned about hiring, open time for the public, you could express your concern that this person shouldn't be hired. But in the end, either you trust Chief Workman or you don't.
Because he reports directly to the board.
He's reappointed.
Mr. Floyd?
I agree with Dr. McDougall. You work hard, you've invested money to appoint managers, they're responsible. You, as being a member of one board and being a member of the other, it's what hat you wear in either room, so to speak. So the guidelines are, as he says, there's the procedures, this is what they're entitled to, not to look at character and make a judgmental call. They pretty
It
much
seems
go
very
back.
contradictory to me.
It could be, he could sue. I don't see why he.
That too, and then you don't know the reasons behind what may have happened. You know, and sometimes we got sued, we found out the easiest financial in town. We decided we'd let the school, whatever sue was, because we're going to pay. I mean, it reads badly, but yet everyone agreed that was what needs to be done. And it doesn't condemn somebody because they allegedly have a black mark.
I fully support the fact that department heads hire, fire, supervise, and manage. That's their role. If there is a standard by which all employees that are hired across the board, those guidelines are met and each one is treated even-handedly, that there is not an appearance that someone has a separate agenda, then of course you would address that separately. But when I went to the public meeting for the personal policy, I expressed in mind, I didn't go page by page, and the proposal that I felt that there was some message that the department heads might be losing some authority. And Art Lawrence said absolutely not, and I took that because I didn't really read it, and I happen to this day. So I take, what John had just raised is a concern because he used a word that could cause us some concern. You're talking about a position without the person being here, and really personal, and, you know, people can take away many things from it. Liability has implications. So, I would strongly encourage that, the personnel policy, what, David said, you know, they look at the scoring, they look at the rate, they look at the fund, they look at
Well,
the
the fund
funding.
finances does the fund.
Yeah, but I mean, but that goes hand in hand, because, and then finance, it doesn't.
So it's really just the technical aspect of, are your Ts crossed and your Is dotted and the boxes are checked off, and there is no other conversation that can be had about an employee at that point.
They may not like your decision, but
you have to
sworn to uphold the rules, regulations, and regardless of your personal feelings, which many times don't need to match.
Okay.
Do all employees get Cory?
We've been, when any new employees have come since we started doing the building commissioner interviews, we've been doing the I-quarries with the state.
Okay, all right, so because, I mean, that would be a good, you know, consistent measurement of where flagging something and then just keep it private and.
Even volunteers, like in the fire department, if there's volunteer firefighters, those folks all go through the same
I
system?
don't know if they do, I mean, I
They're all
can put
volunteer.
anything through it.
The only full-time fireman is the chief. So they're all
So our volunteers in town don't go through a background check similar to our permanent employees?
No, we can put it on for the next agenda and have it, but it's free. It's not a heavy-duty process.
That would address any concern I have, for sure.
And really, they're in the public eye, they're in homes, they're in, you know, you don't want to run into a situation that suddenly it's a problem and that's how you're gonna address it.
Unless it has to do with the school. Aren't they all for it? Anybody that?
Anybody at school, you can't go on a field trip without a query.
Like us, the senior center, we're volunteers, we're Cory.
Yeah.
Anybody that does any help for the seniors, they're Cory.
Right.
If
So
that was-
I would say that they may have stepped outside the boundary, I get their gist, their concerns, but it would open a Pandora's box of political nightmare that went through, I mean, they just need to function, do their job.
So is his email requesting a meeting with the PQB or a meeting with us?
I
or
think,
any of the above?
when's the PQB,
I don't even know when the next meeting is.
Next week, every day.
if you meet next week, I think you should reconsider approving this position. That's my overall take of the process, and just let things play out. Now, if, as the person goes through, if you have a concern, then speaking to Chief Workman would be up to you.
Finance has a comment on the bottom.
And just a comment in general, because I don't want to focus on anybody in particular, but for instance, in the highway department, if we had a highway worker that was terminated a couple of years ago for suspected sexual misconduct, just to throw something in there, and then under the old supervisor, then the new supervisor or superintendent comes in and says, you know, Joe here is a very good worker, he has the licenses, he has the hoisting, has all this stuff, I want to hire him. If that got to us here and we knew or had suspected that there was wrongdoings like that, I think we would be liable if something happened after we hired that
But
person.
if he's not convicted, then it didn't happen, so.
Well, we don't have to.
But would you, I mean, you could convey some concerns in a certain environment.
Yeah.
But I don't think if you say, no, we're not gonna hire him because of suspected sexual inappropriateness versus he's a convicted sex offender.
Yeah, yeah.
There's two separate things there. And so you gotta be careful which, you know, someone can make an allegation that gets blown out of the water.
Agreed.
Yada, yada, yada.
Agreed.
So I think, you know, maybe restarting this and talking, can you talk to the chief about maybe having the chief talk directly to the chairs of the two boards?
He already has with the PPB, he's spoken with every single member of the PPB.
Okay.
So he's already done that. The chair of the finance, I think they just have, my best guess is they have questions about the financing of the piece and where the money is exactly coming from. Because that's generally what they do, is they follow the money.
Maybe
Or
the
they
chief,
follow where the money comes from.
can the chief be here at the next meeting, just if we need to go any further, or do you think we'll have a resolution by next Tuesday?
You mean 2 weeks from Tuesday? Because we're on summer session.
So are you recommending that the best thing for this to happen with this is to have the PQB maybe revisit the conversation and approach in the correct way. Okay, so.
But that's my opinion, it's my own opinion, because if, say there's somebody else that comes through, that it would just get crazy, it would totally get crazy.
No.
The other, and I think the personal policy is working on this, if you do an exit interview and there's, unemployment has, somebody gets terminated for cause, those are looked at as a flag, a red flag. It doesn't have the content of what it was, doesn't necessarily have the gap. But then that in the file you have something that has separated that employment with that person because there was some concern. Whether, so that would be a historical tracking, and so the department head should be aware of that and be able to look at a file, because you are keeping files for a long time, right, at least 10 years. So, how to check it? Yes, the department head is responsible, because you can't possibly be looking at every employee and say, did they do this, verify that? I mean, you're not doing that, Heather, are you?
No, I can't personally investigate every case.
I think it's only the red flags that pop up. Should we have any questions on, the department head can go through the process otherwise. But when a red flag's thrown up, isn't our responsibility to at least
As selectmen.
go through it?
But not, PQB is
Oh,
not.
no, I think we all agree with you on the PQ.
All right, so we have a one-day liquor license for August 2nd from 2 to 8, wine and malt only at Conan Park for Richard Fasoli for a birthday party.
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Any further discussion? It's all okay. Sign one?
No, we used to all sign. We only one signature now on this
Yeah.
thing?
You can do whatever floats your boat.
Unbelievable.
Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. If you want to take a look. Check. No contracts. We have, oh, you here? No, they're here for something?
I mean, if you have any questions about that, and I wanted to do, the department head.
So we have a fiscal 15 formula grant and allocation for the Council on Aging. Night.
So Neil,
Can you tell me what this is, since I don't think I've ever seen it before?
That's a state formula grant that's given based on the number that's allocated, awarded, is based on the numbers of seniors in town. The rate that was approved by the board is not reflecting any increase that may be coming down, which would be, ever so small, but sometimes we have that number before it's submitted, but, and basically, it gives us, we have added some staffing for the office staff to do some hours to support the increase in activity of the seniors, and also
Jackie, you want to see it?
the newsletter, things that we've been doing that the state has consistently provided for the town.
Okay.
So we really don't have a lot of, the parameters really don't change that dramatically from here to there.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Does this have to be in blue before I write in black? Only because everybody else is in blue?
It has to be blue. You have to sign blue. They want to make sure that it's an original.
Second. I just saw everybody else in blue, so I thought that is not gonna work.
I think the green marker would work well.
Wasn't it a little sticky on
Yeah,
that?
but it probably came off when we had a photocopy and put it in the scanner. It doesn't go through the machine well.
Not entirely clueless.
All right, so you read it to Jennifer.
Yes, I will make copies in the morning and bring it over.
What's the date?
29. Didn't you ask that earlier?
In about 3 hours, it's going to be the 30th.
Getting tired. Oh, sure. When do we do this? I know.
Ah, put it back.
Perfect.
Next.
All right, let's move on. I'm skipping the town administrator report.
I only have one quick report.
All right, go ahead, go.
The other thing I'd like to say is yesterday I put this on Facebook, so some folks at home may already know.
Oh, I was gonna say
We
that.
had But it's my report.
It's her
Oh,
report.
man.
We
Go
had a
ahead.
gentleman who came in, he's been a lifelong resident of Southampton, and he was in support of Prop 2.5. He wanted to contribute his share, even though he knew it would only be a drop in the bucket, so we did the calculation as he requested, and he wrote us a check for $200, and he asked that half of it go to the library for the gift fund, and half of it go to the Norris School for the gift fund. And we posted on Facebook earlier today, and apparently over 1,000 people have already taken a look at that post, so that's interesting, that's out there. But he wanted to remain anonymous. He just wanted to get the word out there that he really cared about Southampton, and he wanted to contribute in any which way he could.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank
Very
you.
nice.
Thank you. That's all I have for my 20-second report that I'm allowed to have.
It's shorter every week, doesn't it? Okay,
Amazing.
I'm skipping Labrie Field or?
Labrie Field, that was, I talked to Jeff Swanson, and we'll put this off for the following meeting, but essentially, we are working on resurrecting the recreational use committee. And then he has some questions, and also comes up to whether or not the Labrie Field is ready to utilize yet or not. There's debate over whether the grass is fully rooted.
Ed said next year.
Could I just add that you should probably add them to the list of special town employees if you're creating a new committee?
It was
Or
already-
resurrecting an old one that may
It's
not
already
be
there,
on
it
the
may not-
existing
yeah.
list. I'm just saying.
Okay.
Is Labrie Field open for just casual walking?
You can walk in there, but they don't want anyone playing on the field. They want the grass.
So if
to
somebody goes there with a couple kids, they won't.
So walk in, just don't step on grass.
So if you want to walk your dog or something, is that open for that?
If you clean up after your dog, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so now
I'm
we're
just saying.
I do.
Okay.
on to the building commissioner, zoning enforcement officer position. What do we want to do? I think we made that clear. We're going to send it to the Holyoke City Council, and you will relay that information to Paul.
Yes, we already have a meeting set up for tomorrow.
Okay. We have an appointment of an auxiliary officer, John, I don't know how to say that last name,
Arici?
It's a non-compensated voluntary position and requires the appointment by the Board of Selectmen. A PCF process has also been started for the same position at the request of the board a few years ago and is still being processed.
So that piece of that might be taken out of context, but a few years ago, my understanding is that even though this is an appointed position, the Board of Selectmen had requested that a PCF be generated whenever a new auxiliary officer come into play.
When was that?
I wasn't here.
I don't recall that.
You might have missed that meeting, David.
This is, from what I understand,
This is my understanding from Chief
saves-
Silvernail when we had a discussion, but
Right.
otherwise, this is an appointed position.
Well,
So
he's-
even though the PCF wasn't ready yet, I did want to put it on the appointed part. I think Liz may have some additional information she may or may not want to add, I'm not sure.
So the PQB did not sign that paper at its last meeting because the PQB was not aware of what an auxiliary officer actually was, what they did, how they were or were not compensated, and why a police officer in Southampton would want to be an unpaid police officer, because the understanding of members of that board were that auxiliary police officers generally went out for parades of such, which we don't have, really, so we couldn't really figure out, well, I mean, once a year. So we couldn't figure out, so we had some questions for the chief as to what that meant, and didn't want to sign off on the paper. But that would go back to the communication between new board members and conversations like this, because that board changes over in May, and if an auxiliary position hasn't been brought to them, then
so this is,
They don't know.
this is the dealio. So this guy is gonna be going to the academy. And by appointing him as an auxiliary officer, he gets to go to the academy.
who pays for it?
Let me finish. Chief Silvernail decided to save the town $18,000 a year by making it a non-compensated position. After the officer finishes the academy, if he's taken on, then he's compensated. So while he's at the academy, he's not compensated.
So my question is, for the board,
We've done this in the past.
okay, that's fine, but I'm just wondering, what happens, did you budget for new police officers within the year? If you didn't, why are we hiring new?
This is a volunteer.
For now, until he finishes the
Just
academy.
to get
So
through
we're
the
not
academy.
saying that he's actually, got a job, he's just doing that.
Who's paying for him to go to the academy?
State, I think.
We pay for the academy.
The town of Southampton or the state?
I think the town of Southampton.
And so,
These are good questions, Liz, but this is just, I would make a motion to appoint the guy so he can go to school. And you guys can.
Well, I
you
don't
can-
think we have any money to pay anybody to go to school right now. We don't have that kind of money. We don't need, the town of Southampton has made it very clear, they don't want to spend any more money than we are already spending. Their budget approved cuts to all the departments, not
So,
a 2%.
Does this say that we have to pay for that? I mean, he just needs
Those are
to
some
be
of the
approved.
questions that the PQB had. Who's
Right.
paying for
I
it?
don't think it is. I think it's just okaying him volunteering, auxiliary, you know.
He's volunteering until he's done, and then all of a sudden he's hired.
he's not all of a sudden, he still has to be hired.
Yeah, he's not hired.
He's not hired.
At the training, and it opens up the opportunity for him. I kind of vaguely remember this.
We did this the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But how many people do we have? I don't know. I guess I'm just having a hard time adding people to rosters when you're cutting people's hours.
Call the chief.
I think we should.
I called him today and asked him the same question. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, when I finally got out of work, I called him. Call the chief. That's what you do. Chief Silverdale, I vaguely remember this. Tell me what this was in. Oh, yes. Call the chief. When you have a question, you call the chief. Whether Chief Workman or Chief Silverdale or the highway super. When I was chair, back when you were still in junior high school, I made it my point to talk to the highway super, the chief of police, and the fire chief every week. I would make the rounds, I would go to their offices, I'd sit down and talk to them.
That's why he knows everything.
I'm just saying, that's what.
I've been working very hard on my facial expressions, Nelda, but I couldn't control myself at that moment.
I'm sorry, if there's a question, you call them.
Okay, point taken.
You want I'll give you the non-emergency police number? Okay.
But he made a motion today, second.
Well, now, I have the same question as you. I think we paid for the academy. By doing the auxiliary police officer, we may not pay the salary, which we normally would on a hired. So, and I want to say it's about $6,000. I may be way off. That's something you need to check with the chief on. But we're sending him through the academy because we think we're going to need him at the end of this process.
It's an investment.
Pardon?
It's an investment.
Well, he may.
Well, but what Liz was saying, we don't want to make investments that we know we
But
can't hire.
it may be the point that we don't need a full-time, but we're gonna need part-time because we can't hire a full-time.
But we just got done with line item transfers and said, we're not gonna have this money at the end of next year to do. And now we're at the beginning of the fiscal year saying, let's make the end of the year a little harder for ourselves.
It's gonna be hard, no matter
That
what we
doesn't make
do.
any sense to
There's
me.
no money in town. The town doesn't wanna pay for it.
Exactly.
So,
But you
We
can't,
may
but
lose
before
a,
you,
we may lose a police officer, not
Yeah,
with the
gain
chief.
one.
You know, we might lose him, he just made a good point.
We may lose a police officer.
You know, I mean, he's volunteering.
but might I also add that you're
I'm
appointing
not-
somebody
you're-
without a complete
You're
PCF,
saying
so
it wrong. We may
we don't
lose
have
a police
PCF to
officer, so
sign.
why do we want to train a new
we
one?
need that to appoint
We
them.
may have to go down in staff because of the
You
budget.
can appoint without the PCF.
he's
Well, they appoint and the PCF for two separate things.
Okay.
he's
So there's
appointed
a-
as an officer.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Yep, a motion and a
appoint.
second. Motion, a second to appoint.
Just appoint him as an auxiliary officer. Call the police.
But does that automatically then open the door for him to go to the academy, and then so it's a two part?
Right.
I don't know that.
So,
It's gonna be July 30th in 2.5 hours.
okay, well, there's a motion and a second.
Call the question.
All those in favor? I would abstain until I talk to the police chief. And I will call him tomorrow morning as long as there's not two screaming
You
children.
can't. If you abstain now, it's going to pass.
Right.
Well, Jackie, did you vote?
Yes, I did.
And John, did you?
I'm going to say no because I don't know the cost.
So
Oh, I'm the last vote.
So it passed.
Well, you got to decide what to do.
Well, she said abstain.
She says she would if, and I brought up a point. So if you abstain, it passes. If you don't, it doesn't pass and you get the information. So it's up to you.
This is what chairs are supposed to do. You're supposed to do the split. You're supposed to do this stuff. This is what you're supposed to do. So either you abstain, if you abstain.
I say
or
no until I talk to the police chief.
So it doesn't pass.
Call, yeah, and then.
I'll call him first thing in the morning.
So does it pass pending? Because that's not the motion. The motion is to appoint. And you're either just say yay, nay, or abstain, you just pick one.
It's dead now, because
What she said, but are you saying yes or no?
No.
Okay, so then dead. So we don't appoint him. So he can't feed his kids.
until the next meeting. He's not getting paid, Dave.
We crushed it, you haven't made it clear.
Yeah, I think he'll be all right.
Wow, the guilt.
He may be a great person to appoint, but again, without knowing the financial aspect of it, it's hard to.
I'm only acting on the best interest of the town. I can only manage the money that they give me. I
Same
don't
here.
feel right spending money that we don't have without all the answers.
Liz, I'm acting on the best interest of the town as well.
You should have financial information before you at all times so that you can make that determination.
If you have questions, you're not gonna have all the information. At some
No,
point,
some, I'm saying
you
some.
can't have all. At some point, you just make a decision and move forward and trust the people you have in those positions.
Okay.
We don't have revenue reports printed out yet for the
I know, but I've been waiting for it.
We have an application appointment for the Cultural Council opening for Karen
Make a motion to appoint.
Blanchard. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have an application appointment for Emergency Management Director Donald Snyder.
Make a motion to appoint.
That one, I did speak with Ed earlier, and he mentioned that he thought that, our fire chief was also interested in the position, but he was supposed to send something in. I had not got anything, I have not heard anything.
All right, then postpone for 2 weeks, because we haven't had one anyways, so.
No, we have not.
So I would postpone in 2 weeks to see if someone can talk
Well,
to Chief Work.
When we get the next tornado, you know, we kinda want one.
Yes.
Yeah, right, you're just too late.
But you want somebody, I mean, I know Don has great experience, but I just want to make sure that we look at all aspects, that's all.
Does he live in town?
Yeah.
This man lives in town?
Yeah, we saw his qualifications.
That Judy's husband, David?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll postpone.
Well, can we postpone it and do the same thing we do with the police chief? You know, give Chief Workman a call tomorrow and find out if he's really interested?
Can you call Chief Workman tomorrow?
Because if he
I'm not
is,
calling
fine,
him.
if not,
But he doesn't live in town.
Did you
Nope.
close,
true.
had you closed the,
So I'm still sort of interested in,
It's not, it wasn't a job, it's a
Dawn
volunteer
being-
gig, so it's up to the
matters,
rest
he's
of
in
them.
town. If there's-
Is that
And over 20 days.
But no, if there's down power lines and everything, and you can't move from
No,
Belchertown
but I
here.
mean, is that a requirement for the position that you
No.
have to be?
No, and you don't have to be fire chief.
Well, the other thing is, does the chief have to move into town within that year of his?
But not now. Let's just stick with
That would
the,
take
Stick
the-
with
that
the
would take the
agenda.
issue out
Let's
of it.
stick with the agenda at the
stick with the
moment.
agenda. So,
So let's move on to the police chief. Do we want to schedule a performance review? Is a personal contract something we wanted to, oh.
things and then I can leave?
Oh, yeah, I thought you were just hanging out.
No.
I thought you really liked us.
6-3.
6-3. 6-3?
Okay, so I
Oh, sorry.
I was serious when
I
I said.
thought you said town administrator report.
So this is, Ryan Gillett has, given me the, mandate, to sort of be the point person during this transition period of not having a administrative assistant for the zoning board. So, the part, and I haven't posted the PCF, so, and I haven't done it because I don't know where this person's gonna work. The desk that was being used is the one, the assessors are hiring someone.
When are you planning to have the person come in to do what time of day?
Well, I mean, it has to be, when that desk is not occupied, when any desk is not occupied,
So
let's put it that way.
we have, we're working on creating new profiles for each of the computers so that you can log on, log off, and look at your profile on whatever computer you want because it's on the network. So one thing we can look into is, especially going forward, we can figure out what hours folks are actually in the building department. Perhaps we can do it during the hours where the administrative assistant's already present so that their stuff's monitored, and perhaps they can borrow that computer for the time being, and that might utilize time to the fullest.
You know, the fact that she was here most of the day, it allowed people coming in to ask questions, to process paper, pull the newspaper. So for us to say, you know, you can come 3:30 to 4:30 or something, you know, it's really limiting. The other part is she backed up all the files from that computer because, you know, she no longer should have access to that space. So, and I don't want to take any of it, so it's being locked up in the town clerk's office. So the other part is that nobody's getting emails. We're not getting any emails to the zoning board.
Oh, we can fix that. All I need to know is which emails it needs to be forwarded.
No, for the sake of time, do you think you could make a time to sit down with Heather and sort some of that out? Is that okay? Because it's almost 9:30 now. I mean, it sounds like you have multiple little issues.
I can happily resolve that with you, I think, on our level.
Yeah, so that doesn't have to be here, just for the sake of time. This is what we're gonna do.
All right, so, then the other question I have, which could be answered very quickly, under number 2, approval of minutes, what happened to the minutes from 2013 that haven't been posted, or is there a reason why only these are being presented?
We don't always have all of the ones prior electronically easily defined, so they have to be scanned in and then go through the process and sent over to John. So when we have free time, we'll get there.
Okay, because, you know, at some point you said that it was very important because we were out of compliance with
We actually caught up with what they needed, so they're all set on their world.
Okay.
And once we actually approve these minutes, we will continue to be all set.
Okay, all right, so, I will call you next week.
Sounds
All right,
good.
it's no rush. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
you
Nova.
Drive
for your
safely.
transparency, which I think is important.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Take care.
coming and hanging out with us.
Drive safely.
All right, so we have, I'm just gonna group 7, 6, 1, 2, and 3 all together. Do we want to schedule a performance evaluation review for the police chief, highway superintendent, town administrator? Town administrator has to have one, so we need to set a date.
So September 15th.
Got that?
Are we sticking, the question is, once we get in September, are we sticking to every other week, or are we going back to every week?
And we need to take a roll call on next week's, not next week's meeting, the week after, when we meet again, because I won't be here. So if anybody else isn't gonna be here, we can either move it up a week, or
So
come off schedule, or
the
meet anyway
schedule-
without me, which is.
So when you're saying about schedule stuff, so September 16th is a third Tuesday in September. Do you want to say that at that time we're going to sit down and have it, or are we going to have some sort of evaluation to fill out that will be then handed in on the
You'll
16th?
have that beforehand to talk about the review on September 16th.
Okay, cool. So September 16th for the administrator. Randall just got hired. When was his hire date? What's his
It
anniversary
was
date?
like January.
So 6 months, right?
So you don't want to do it all at once, because, well, unless you want to do right in a row. I mean, you go September 23rd and then September 30th and have it done.
That's fine with me. Are we going back to every week in September, or are we gonna wait till October?
Oh, yeah, wait, what are we doing here? Are we doing every other week?
Yeah.
Because if we're doing every other week, then it's,
All right, so,
it would be September 9th for mine.
okay, you want to do September 9th for Heather, September 23rd for
Randall?
Highway, and then October 7th for the chief of police. What about the fire department?
We just did his couple.
But his
that's
contract
right,
is
yeah.
up for, when's his contract up?
His contract's not up 2016. His one-year anniversary is in
Yeah.
October.
Yeah, right, so don't we need to talk about a contract, a performance evaluation at 1 year?
We already did performance evaluation a couple months ago.
At 6 months.
Well, it was slightly delayed. It was more like 8. But it's up to the board.
And
Would
isn't
you
there
like to do
something in
another
his contract about salary at 1 year is that set in stone, or is there something in his contract about a salary?
His salary automatically went up at the fiscal year change. I'll just get everyone a copy of the contract, and then you guys can review and ask questions should you have them of me.
Okay.
On these reviews, I'm hoping that we're going to put some effort into these and get feedback in the proper format from people so that we can
Right.
use it as a positive.
So can you email us the form and
I will get everyone
get
blank
started so that
forms.
you're prepared and there's no,
Would the board prefer me to bring in blank sets of forms next week so you have a
that
staff?
would be very helpful.
Blank sets of forms for what?
For the performance there's a set form.
Right, but hopefully we're not the only 5 up here that are going to do the forms. We should get feedback from their constituents.
Right.
Because otherwise, I mean, we know
Not
very little about the department heads, where the departments, you know, that work with them and the people that work with them should contribute to all these evaluations.
You're a brave man.
I think we
I
need to
think
do
that's
it.
the only way to do it,
I
but
know.
maybe we need a list of who works there, and we can divvy it up, and everybody can take somebody to talk to.
I find, at least I do a lot of evaluations, I find that if you do it right, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and sometimes you get dinged for it. But if you don't do it right, it causes more problems down the road.
We'll give plenty of forms to the board, and you guys can divvy it up as you feel fit. ECAT contract, August 12th, is that amenable to everybody?
I won't be here.
Okay, so we'll come back to that date.
You can,
The ECAT, just a reminder, we have a contract with them, and we're due under
That's the
contract
12th.
for
Just- No, do it August, yeah, just do it the 12th.
Can you remind me what ECAT is?
ECAT is our,
The guy in the corner over there behind the curtains?
Guy behind the curtain?
Easthampton Cable Access
There you go.
Television.
Easthampton Cable Access.
All right.
Okay. Turnover policy, Donna's working on this policy, it's not quite ready, but strong recommendations from the auditors that we establish one. Anything else?
the IT policy, I'm just gonna touch next time. I'm out of energy at this point.
And do we need any executive sessions?
Well, just to give folks a brief piece on the former road property. That was,
All the stuff that's in the back here?
yes.
So we need to go into executive.
Well, it's a question of the board of whether or not they'd like to.
Can
We
that,
need to discuss what we're gonna be doing with it.
I think when we do this, I think conservation should be here.
So you wanna put it off for 2 weeks and
Yeah,
invite
and I would have
conservation?
conservation, because it looks like it's gonna be a gift to the town, and something about taxes and then piece
Okay,
of
so
property, so.
we'll put it off for 2 weeks, but now we need to just figure out when our next meetings are, Miss Liz.
Well,
So meet the 12th, that's fine, I just won't be
You
here.
won't be here.
And we have to go back to the warrants, because Jackie was
Oh, right, to do
MIA for a moment.
So August 12th is your next meeting at 6:30.
That sounds-
You guys have a lovely time now. It's my one meeting of the year. Just saying. We have a payroll warrant.
Who's the vice chair, Ed?
Ed.
Gotta make sure he's here right now.
And then we have a bill warrant that you have to approve. You already signed it. You don't have copies. It was last week that people came and signed.
My mother is
Let's see.
working, and the president of the United States
Okay.
is staying in the same
Signed that there.
hospital.
I'm gonna make
Locked
sign.
up all the votes, and
Signed
she's
that
been
there.
sending 14 text messages with pictures.
where is she?
I don't know. I said.
Cannot say that.
Some more here.
So the first sheet just has a signature for Liz and for
Jackie.
Jackie.
Okay, so do we sign on the second one?
Everyone else signs on the second one.
Everyone else? Not me?
Yes, as in Jackie and Liz sign where their names are lovely,
But not the second one?
not on the second one. The rest of the sheets of paper, they can sign regularly.
All right, so you need
I've
the,
been working with the auditors on it.
So I missed what you said. I was busy looking at the president. I signed
Sign
here.
where your name is, and then there's a few more forms in that. Did you find all the forms? There was like 3.
yeah, I think we're done.
And I can sign all the rest of these?
No, don't sign that, because that's the same form. There's other ones that are attached, that aren't attached, rather. There's other signature pages. It should be in the very first on the left-hand side of the sleeve. There you go.
Oh,
Bingo.
look at this here, look.
Can I sign all these?
You can sign all of those ones.
He's blaming me. I thought we were all done. Oh, there goes a pen.
No, we're not done yet.
Yep.
I know, we got that look from Liz. You missed something.
We still need,
What is this,
motions
this
and votes.
thing about containing your looks not working?
Yeah, I can tell what she's doing.
I've been working
Tell she's
really
on.
hard on keeping my facial expressions under control.
Liz has them
Tell
written
your
out.
mommy,
on the agenda if
You
you
had that
say.
mommy look like you know, you better get your act together.
Is that it? Are we done?
You gotta make motions.
Make a motion, payroll warrant, 10/05
Yeah,
for the amount of $195,050.06.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Make another warrant, a motion for warrant 15-4-A, $26,721.89, and we all can do this one, so.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Another one we can all do is PD 15-5A, $143,233.51. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. There is a bill warrant,
that I move at W1504 in the amount of $329,000, $651.25.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you sign them all?
Thank you, everybody.